Chapter 199. Krasu and Urian turned to look at Gudnia at almost the same time. Their eyes narrowed slightly, and a dangerous light flashed through them. Amy, don't be too familiar with him. Meg looked back at Amy with a serious expression. In a world like this, it was better to show off one's muscles and determination, even if the muscles were Amy's. Oh. Amy nodded obediently. Hee, go away, little brat. Gudnia pursed his lips. He didn't take Amy seriously at all, and was about to leave. It was beneath him to waste his breath on a 3-year-old girl. Whoosh! Just as Gudnia reached Amy, a ball of bluish-purple flame suddenly erupted from Amy's hand. It was as if a fireball had suddenly exploded, rising more than half a meter into the air. The scorching flames made the air dry and hot, and Gudnia's eyelashes, eyebrows, and hair were instantly charred black and slowly fell to the ground. His bulging belly was also set ablaze, and the flames quickly spread up his silk clothes. Ah! A magic caster! Gudnia exclaimed. He patted his body in a flurry as he ran toward the door. He didn't even have time to pick up his purse, which had fallen to the ground, and ran out as soon as the door opened. The flame in Amy's hand had already shrunk into a small fireball, and she raised her hand to throw it. Okay, that's enough. Throw that fireball, and he'll be cooked. Meg patted Amy's head with a smile. A small punishment was enough. If someone died, it would be a big deal in Chaos City. Okay. Amy looked at Gudnia's back with a hint of pity. She put down her hand and squatted down to pick up the purse on the ground. Gudnia ran out of the door and bumped into a burly bald man. The bald man didn't move an inch, but Gudnia was the one who was sent flying. Gudnia rolled on the ground twice and put out the fire on his body. Gudnia let out a sigh of relief. He looked down and saw that the front of his clothes was almost burnt off. Most of his eyebrows and hair were burnt off. His face was covered in smoke and he looked very embarrassed. He didn't know how to react after being burned by a 4-year-old child. He raised his head and was about to curse at the people who had sent him flying, but when he saw that they were 3 tall and ferocious-looking demons, he immediately cowered and lowered his head, not daring to say a word. Boss, what's wrong with this guy? Mond rubbed his bald head as he looked at Gudnia, who was still smoking. According to my analysis, he's most likely on fire. Keel stroked his chin and said seriously, You're really smart, Keel. Your analysis is very close to the truth. Mond nodded thoughtfully, looking at Keel with a hint of admiration in his eyes. Of course, he's burned like this. If you ask me, this guy probably ate something and didn't pay, so he was burned by the little boss. What an idiot. Sargeras looked at Gudnia with a disdainful expression. I've already taken the 18 gold coins. Here's the rest. Next time you eat, you'd better pay, or I'll burn you again. The door opened with a ding, and Amy walked out. She threw the purse in front of Gudnia with a serious expression. Gudnia put away his wallet, feeling a bit humiliated. He wanted to say something, but when he thought of the terrifying flames, he swallowed his words. A 4-year-old magician was too scary. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. There was no need for him to be so quick with his words. Hello, little boss, Sargeras said seriously. Hello, little boss. Keel and Mond immediately stood at attention with respectful expressions. In their eyes, Meg, who could make such a magical Ruggiamo, was worthy of respect. The fate of the lava race depended on this Ruggiamo, so they showed great respect to Amy. Hello, Big Bald Head 2, and Bald Head 3, Amy greeted the 3 demons, then turned and walked into the restaurant. How is this possible? Gudnia stared at the 3 demons. How could they be afraid of a little half-elf? You want to dine and dash? Sargeras walked up to Gudnia and looked down at him with great interest. Then he pursed his lips. Even I wouldn't dare. You're a real warrior. Then he opened the door and walked into the restaurant. Warrior. Keel and Mond gave him a thumbs up at the same time, then followed Sargeras into the restaurant. What the hell is going on? Gudnia struggled to get up from the ground. Looking at his broken clothes and the luxurious restaurant, he wanted to cry. What kind of background does this restaurant have? Gudnia took a deep look at the restaurant. For the first time in his life, He felt fear. He covered his face with his hands and limped towards the outer circle of the square. Most of the merchants in the square knew him. He wanted to save face. "I'm sorry. Something happened. Please continue. I hope you enjoy your meal." Meg looked at everyone apologetically. Then he raised his hand to stop Yarbemia, who was about to bow and apologize. He looked back at her and smiled. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Thank you, boss," Yarbemia said in a low voice. "Don't mention it, Mr. Mac. We all supported you today. It's just that my Ruggiamo. I'm a little hungry." Harrison smiled and rubbed his belly. "Yeah, and my tofu pudding. My young Jew fried rice." Everyone else chimed in with smiles on their faces. The atmosphere in the restaurant became harmonious again. They all thought Meg had done the right thing. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded with a smile. He patted Yarbemia on the shoulder and walked toward the kitchen. "Welcome." When she heard the doorbell ring, a vibrant smile appeared on Yarbemia's face again, and she turned around to greet him. "I've made up my mind. I'm going to memorize Mammoth's rules today." "Huh. If Boss Mag says he's going to blacklist him, then he's really blacklisted him. If Little Boss says he's going to start a fire, then he's really going to start a fire. We can't afford to offend them. We can't afford to offend them." Harrison and the others huddled together to memorize the restaurant rules. They had never been so serious, not even when they were studying at Chaos School. "Wait, I think I saw Mr. Mac write something down in a black notebook." "Really? Is that the legendary blacklist?" Chapter 200. This incident didn't take up too much of his time, so Meg continued to cook. His mood wasn't affected, and he wasn't worried about Goodinia's vengeance. He was just a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. What could he do? Many of the customers in the restaurant were most likely from the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Even customers with Grey Temple badges had been here a few times. He could handle most of the storms in Chaos City by grabbing their stomachs. As for Julian and Crassus, they were the ultimate trump card. If the two of them worked together, no one on the entire continent would be able to defeat them. He had stood up for Yarbemia today to establish the restaurant's reputation and store rules. He didn't want to appear too powerful, but he had to tell everyone his bottom line. Amy was his bottom line, and no one was allowed to touch her. It didn't matter if he couldn't beat her. He could blacklist her. For a foodie, not being allowed to eat was probably worse than being beaten up. As for the Aden Chamber of Commerce, which banned half-racial waitresses, Meg didn't mind giving it a push if he had the chance. Of course, Meg wasn't naive enough to think that he could overthrow a major chamber of commerce with his current abilities. He didn't even have the right to talk to them yet. However, just because he couldn't do it now didn't mean that he couldn't do it in the future. Meg had seen too much of this in his previous life. It was normal for businessmen to rise and fall. No matter how sturdy a building was, there would be a day when it would decay and collapse. This was especially true when there was a technological revolution. The established business model would be greatly impacted, and a new bourgeoisie would rise. If the ruling class of this world is still so decadent, I don't mind bringing them into the era of the Industrial Revolution and changing their rulers, Meg thought to himself. He looked up at the bicycle under the counter outside. Although he had spent most of his time slacking off in university, he still graduated from one of the top 10 mechanical design majors in the world. As long as he had the money, changing the world with machinery wasn't just a dream. "Honey, did the scar on my face really fade?" "Really? I love you, honey. It faded. It faded. It's really faded." "War, mother. The scar on my forehead is finally gone." All types of elated voices rang out in the restaurant, and there were even some who were crying tears of joy. Most of them were customers whose scars had improved after eating the tofu pudding. Just one bowl. It shouldn't be too much, right? In the corner, Joel looked down at the scar on his chest, then at the bowl of savory tofu pudding in front of him, and fell into deep thought. "Whatever. I can't wait, I'll eat it first. I'll just draw some more." His hesitation only lasted for a while. The faint fragrance of beans made him pick up the spoon and eat. The hesitation on his face was immediately replaced by a sense of pleasure. After a short while, he finished the entire bowl of tofu pudding. Joel put down the spoon in his hand as if he hadn't had enough. Suddenly, he opened his shirt and looked down. He put down his shirt with a dejected expression, and sighed to himself. I've lost 2 badges from more than 20 years ago. If this continues, I won't even know what to brag about in the future. I used to think I could brag until I was 80 years old. Sigh, let's go, Luo Xia said softly to Gloria as she gave the money to Amy. Okay. Gloria nodded slightly and stood up gracefully. When she walked to the door, she couldn't help but look back at the kitchen. Through the glass, she could see Meg's profile as he cooked seriously. Sure enough, a serious man was the most attractive. Gloria. Luo Xia, who was pressing on the door, turned around to look at Gloria with a puzzled expression. She also looked in the direction that Gloria was looking at, and a smile appeared on her face. Yes, this man was indeed fatally attractive to women. No matter if it was his looks, cooking skills, or protective personality, every woman dreamed of marrying such a perfect man. Unfortunately, he already had a daughter. Okay. Gloria quickly withdrew her gaze. Her face behind the black veil blushed slightly. She quickly lowered her head and followed Luo Xia out of the door. A luxurious carriage soon stopped at the door. The 2 of them got in one after another, and the carriage slowly drove away. Take off your veil. I'll show you. As soon as they sat down, Luo Xia looked at Gloria and said. She looked nervous and expectant. Okay. Gloria hesitated for a moment. Looking at Luo Xia's encouraging eyes, she slowly untied the string of the veil and took it off. Luo Xia's eyes lit up. What a stunning appearance. She was also a woman, and her eyes lit up. Her thick, light blonde, slightly curly hair was casually tied up with a purple hair tie. It was so close to the seat that it almost reached the floor. Her delicate facial features seemed to have been sculpted by God with the most delicate skills. Long eyelashes, light purple eyes, small cherry lips, and snow-white, sparkling skin. Her limbs were slender, but her chest was quite impressive. The black dress still couldn't hide her impressive figure. If it weren't for the thumb-sized tan spot on the left side of her face, she would definitely be a beauty who could attract people's attention on the street. That spot was like a stone falling into a pot of tofu pudding, and it ruined a perfect and delicate work of art. It really faded. The black turned into a tan. It really worked. Luo Xia looked at the spot and suddenly held Gloria's hand in surprise. Really? Gloria's pretty face was also full of surprise and disbelief. Her slender fingers touched her cheek gently. She had only eaten 1 serving, and it would be a surprise if the black color could fade a little. But now it turned directly into a tan. Such an obvious and intuitive change. Of course it's true. When have I ever lied to you? You can go home and look at yourself in the mirror. Luo Xia nodded with a smile. Then she reached out and rolled up her sleeves. She pointed at the scar on it and said, Look, isn't it a little smaller than when I came here? It's true. Gloria's eyes lit up, and her voice unconsciously became a little lighter. The burn scar on Luo Xia's hand did become smaller, and the skin that hadn't healed began to flatten. It seemed that it would be healed in a few days. Believe me, it won't be long before the spot on your face is healed, just like my scar. Luo Xia touched Gloria's head gently and said with a smile, Then you can wear beautiful clothes and go out. Those men won't be willing to move their eyes away from you. Chapter 201. After lunch, Meg turned down a customer's request to enter the shop with a smile on his face. He turned over the sign on the door and looked at Amy, who was scratching Ugly Duckling in her arms, with a smile on her face. Father, what time is Amy going to go to school? Amy looked at Meg with anticipation in her eyes. Her father seemed a little different today, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what was different about him. Master Crassus said that you can be there before 2, so Amy should take a nap before going. Meg walked over with a smile and patted Amy's head. Okay. Amy squinted her eyes and rubbed her head against Meg's hand like a kitten. Ugly Duckling was also rubbing its head against her little hand. Boss, if you're too busy in the morning, maybe. I can take Amy to school, Yarbemia, who was wiping the table, said to Meg with sincerity in her eyes. Well, Meg pondered. Just as Yarbemia had said, it was indeed a little rushed in the morning. It would take about half an hour to take Amy to school, and putting the tofu pudding in the pot first would affect its texture to a certain extent. But big sister Mia, do you know how to ride a bicycle? Amy looked up at Mia with a serious expression. Mia was taken aback. She glanced at the counter. That two-wheeled thing would fall to the ground if it was placed there. Only a genius like Boss Mag could make something like that and drive it perfectly. I don't know how to ride. Mia shook her head. Then it'll take us a long time to walk, and Amy will have to wake up even earlier. But I want to sleep a little longer tomorrow. Amy looked at Yarbemia with a conflicted expression. I can learn. I can learn how to ride a bicycle. Yarbemia hesitated momentarily before looking at Meg with a determined expression. Boss, teach me how to ride a bicycle. Okay. Amy clapped her hands and looked up at Meg. Father, why don't you teach big sister Mia how to ride a bicycle? That way, she can send me to school on a bicycle. Well, it's not impossible, but... Meg nodded. Yarbemia obviously wanted to share some of his workload, but bicycling was not easy to learn, especially for Yarbemia who had just seen a bicycle for the first time. Bicycling is not easy to learn. It's not something that can be mastered in a short period of time. It's easy to fall in the beginning. It's okay, I'm not afraid of pain. Yarbemia shook her head, her eyes filled with determination. All right, father, please teach big sister Mia, Amy said coquettishly as she shook Meg's hand. Okay, then I'll teach Mia when I'm free. Meg smiled as he patted Amy's head. He really didn't know what to do with the two of them. He paused for a moment before saying, but I happen to have to go out at noon. After sending Amy to school, I'll make a trip to the employment agency. The restaurant needs another employee. So, you're going to hire another pretty sister? Amy's eyes lit up as she looked at Meg curiously. Boss, Yarbemia lowered her head slightly, her expression filled with self-blame. It seemed that she was too useless. She couldn't even do such a job well. Mia, you've already done very well. No waitress can do a better job than you. Meg looked at Yarbemia with a smile as he shook his head, and said, but if I let you do everything on your own, you'll appear to be in too much of a hurry. You won't even be able to give a proper smile to the customers, and you'll be running around the restaurant like a whirlwind. That's not what I had in mind. You'll be too tired, and the customers will also appear to be a little uncomfortable. I understand, boss. Yarbemia nodded with a thoughtful expression, and didn't say anything else. Then what kind of pretty sister should we find? Amy asked as she looked at Meg with curiosity in her eyes. It would be best if we could find someone as capable as Mia, Meg replied with a smile. Meow. Ugly Duckling raised its head and let out a cry in an attempt to attract Amy's attention. It seemed to have sensed that its status was about to drop again. Amy slept on the counter for a while, and when it was about time, Meg woke her up. He pushed the bicycle out, and Amy climbed onto the back seat. She turned around and waved at Ugly Duckling, who was sitting at the entrance, and said, Come here, Ugly Duckling. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling looked at the basket in front of the bicycle, and shook its head with a reluctant expression. Forget it, it's car sick, so let's just let it stay at home. Meg turned around to look at Ugly Duckling with a smile. He then got onto the bicycle and turned to Amy, and asked, Are you ready? Yes, let's go. Amy nodded with elation as she spread open her little arms. A smile appeared on Meg's face as he stomped his foot, and the bicycle immediately shot forward like an arrow. After upgrading his strength, Meg felt that each and every stomp of his foot was much more powerful, and he was able to maintain his current speed. Even with such a flashy two-wheeled bicycle traveling at such a fast speed, the number of people who turned to look at it was still off the charts. Could it be that this is the latest flying magic spell? Probably. If you add wheels, it will look pretty cool. When the passers-by saw this scene, they started to analyze it one by one. It's faster than a horse-drawn carriage. 2. 3. Father is so awesome. Amy yelled with elation as she spread open her arms. She wasn't afraid of such a fast speed at all. Instead, she was quite excited, and wanted nothing more than for Meg to go faster. The bicycle stopped at the entrance of the school, and before Meg had a chance to say anything, Amy had already jumped off the bicycle. She looked at Meg, and shook her head as she said, "Father, you don't have to go in. I can find the classroom on my own. Goodbye. Millimeter goodbye. Be a good girl and study magic." Meg nodded with a smile. Amy had been running around Chaos City since she was a little girl, so she could play with other children on the first day of class, so he didn't have to worry about her finding the classroom. Millimeter I will. Amy waved her hand, and walked into the school. When she passed by the guard at the entrance, she greeted the old man and the orc. "Hello, Grandpa Radish, Uncle Red Turtle." The two men who had just raised their hands were left standing there with stiff smiles on their faces. Meg facepalmed. This little girl really didn't let go of any opportunity to give others a nickname. However, Meg glanced at the old man who was wearing a white short suit and had almost all of his hair falling off. There was also an orc who had short dark red hair and was holding a black shield that looked like a tortoise's shell. This nickname was a little appropriate. Grandpa Radish? Uncle Red Turtle? Chapter 202. Meg nodded at the two of them with a smile before riding away on his bicycle. What could he do? He couldn't do anything about his girl's innate ability. Antoine and Arnold glanced at one another before shrugging in a resigned manner. The fact that Mag had received a pass from Headmaster Novan and was held in such high regard by Heidel indicated that he was definitely not an ordinary person. Furthermore, he most likely belonged to Chaos School. However, they had been the guards of Chaos School for many years, and had seen all kinds of mischievous students. It was really rare to see an elementary school student come over with two nicknames just for a greeting. Meg didn't hurry back to the Aiden Square. Instead, he rode along the streets of Chaos School. Even though he had been living a pitiful life for the past few years, Meg Alex was still quite familiar with Chaos City, so he decided to go to a place based on his memory. Even though there were 8 gates in Chaos City, it was actually a large square city. There were 2 straight streets that ran through the entire city, dividing it into 9 regions that were shaped like a well. The Aiden Square was located in the middle of the southern part of the city, and to the right was Chaos School. Apart from Chaos School, most of the people living in this area were teachers and their families, as well as people who worked in the literary and cultural fields. This was the area where most of the intellectuals in Chaos City lived. On the left side of the Aiden Square was Chaos City's renowned Bastille prison. The prison occupied an entire area, and was one of the most famous prisons on the entire Norland continent. Aside from being known as the most difficult prison to break into, the most special thing about it was that there were prisoners of all races locked up in it. This prison had been set up ever since Chaos City was founded. The peace treaty was signed in Chaos City, and the war between races that had lasted for thousands of years came to an end. The continent was divided into 8 parts, and a new chapter of relative peace began. At the same time, some of the people who had killed innocent people during the war were put on trial, and all of them were locked up in the Bastille prison. Back then, the construction of the prison was funded by all races, and the best craftsmen and engineers from all races had done their best to build it. Most of the buildings were tens of meters, and some were even hundreds of meters underground. The guardians of the prison were very powerful. It was said that they could defend against the attacks of a team of 10 dragons. It was not an exaggeration to say that the prison was impregnable. Chaos City could be said to be built on the foundation of the Bastille prison. It was for this reason that Meg's house didn't have an exit, because the Bastille prison's walls were 10 meters away. Behind the walls was the prison built underground. Some of the long-lived prisoners were still in their prime even after 100 years had passed. Occasionally, there would be rumors of prisoners breaking out of the prison. However, in the past 100 years, no prisoners had ever come out of the Bastille prison. This added a layer of legend to the Bastille prison. The place Meg was going to today was the street behind the Aiden Square. That was the center of the entire Chaos City, and was regarded as the safest place in Chaos City. On the left side of the street was the Grey Temple, on the right side was the street where the City Lord lived, and on the north side was where the garrison of Chaos City was stationed. It was a wealthy area where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Meg rode his bicycle along the wide avenue. After seeing some magnificent buildings in the distance, he turned into a side alley. "System, give me some disguise items. I want to change my appearance," Meg said in his heart as he stopped the bicycle. "The system, cash." Meg took out a bag of money impatiently. The system can provide a variety of disguises for the host. According to the difficulty, the fees are as follows: 1. Ordinary disguise, 2 gold coins. 2. Disguise plus ordinary makeup, 4 gold coins. 3. Disguise plus advanced makeup, 6 gold coins. 4. Female disguise, 10 gold coins. Which one would the host like to choose? The system's voice suddenly became cheerful. The system recommends the fourth option. The system will provide you with thousands of sets of female clothing for the host to choose from. At the same time, you will be given 1 free use of makeup, 1 free use of wigs, and 1 free use of high-end jewelry. You will also be given 1 free use of a real-time voice changer, which costs 10 gold coins to activate permanently, the system continued. What the hell is female clothing? System, are you not a fucking decent system? Meg almost jumped up. Host, please don't look down on women's clothing. From the perspective of camouflage, changing one's personality is the best way to perfectly hide all traces of you. No one would ever think that a sexy and enchanting succubus is actually a restaurant owner. Isn't that exciting? The system said solemnly. Nonsense. Meg pursed his lips. This system was becoming more and more unreliable. Female clothing? No way. Unless you give me another strength point or 50,000 gold coins, do you think you can trick me into wearing female clothing? However, Meg quickly regained his composure. The system is only providing suggestions. The host can choose on his own. The system immediately shut up. What's the level of advanced makeup? Meg looked at the package and asked. Advanced makeup refers to the host's entire body makeup. The host can choose age, identity, and gender. The system will make the most suitable makeup according to the host's requirements to make you more suitable for your identity and age. No one will be able to tell from your appearance. The system's voice sounded. What about ordinary makeup? Meg asked again. Ordinary makeup is 2 fake eyebrows, 2 fake mustaches, and a little white powder on the face. That's all. The system responded. Very ordinary indeed. Meg nodded thoughtfully, then said decisively, then I'll choose the third option. My identity is a bard, male human, 60 years old. That's it. Ding. 6 gold coins have been deducted. The clothes are being customized. It will arrive in 3 minutes. The system's voice sounded. Meg felt the wallet in his hand become much lighter. However, he had something to do today, so it was better to be cautious. By the way, system, can you help me put away the bicycle first? If it's stolen, I won't be happy. Meg looked at the bicycle beside him and asked again. There was only 1 bicycle in the whole city. Of course, he couldn't ride it. Otherwise, why would he disguise himself? Even if he exposed himself, it wouldn't be effective. Chapter 203. I think those chefs who used their resentment to get you out of this world would be pissed to death if they knew you were such a system. Meg sighed. A system that had no principles when it came to money wasn't a proper god of cookery system. Don't worry, they won't be able to see it, the system replied calmly. All right, but don't be in a hurry. I'll do it after I get changed. Meg nodded. This was the first time he was being charged for parking in this world. Meg's eyes suddenly lit up. By the way, what if I draw a few parking spots in front of the restaurant and charge for them? The Aiden Square belongs to the City Lord's castle. If you charge for parking at the entrance, the City Lord's castle may retaliate. Also, if the City Lord's castle sees a profit, they may draw parking spots all over the Aiden Square and charge for them, the system replied. That makes a lot of sense. Meg thought about it carefully. It was very likely that the situation would develop in the direction the system suggested. That would be a waste of his time thinking of a good way to make money for the City Lord's castle. Ding. The clothes have been customized. Would the host like to change his clothes now? The system prompted. Yes. Meg looked around the empty alleyway and nodded. A set of grey and black robes, a pair of cloth shoes, and a black and white wig quickly appeared in the bicycle basket. Meg took off his outer robes and put on the old-fashioned grey and black robes and shoes. He followed the system's instructions and put on the wig. Please open your hands and close your eyes. The system will perform a high-level makeup on the host. The duration will be about 30 seconds. The system's voice sounded again. Mag closed his eyes, and immediately felt several brushes brushing his face and hands at the same time. Half a minute later, all of the brushes were gone, and the system notified Mag that he could open his eyes. Meg opened his eyes and looked at his hands. There were some fine wrinkles on his hands, making them look like the hands of an old man. Your hands do look good, but I wonder how your face looks like. Mag reached out to touch his grayish-white beard. He was suddenly a little curious. 1 copper coin for 1 use of a mirror. The system prompted. No. Meg walked towards a well not far away and said, System, put away my bicycle. The parking timer starts now. Host, as a candidate for the god of cookery, you're not even willing to spend a single copper coin. Don't you feel ashamed? The system sounded somewhat dissatisfied, but it still obeyed and put away the bicycle. Being thrifty is a virtue. You are the one who should reflect on yourself. Why would a god of cooking system want to earn a single copper coin? Meg curled his lips and retorted mercilessly. The system fell into silence. Meg walked to the edge of the well and looked down. The water surface of the well was very close to the mouth of the well. He could clearly see the reflection of an old scholar in his 60s. He had an elegant temperament. He wore a grey robe and had long black and white hair. If he held a book and a ruler in his hand, he would look like a teacher. Who is this? Even Meg wanted to ask. Even the shape of his eyebrows had been changed. It was completely different from his original appearance. Even if Amy stood in front of him, she probably wouldn't be able to recognize him. Meg suddenly believed the system's words. It could turn him into an enchanting succubus. The system can be quite reliable sometimes. Mag nodded with satisfaction. This disguise technique was like plastic surgery. Even though he had spent 6 gold coins on it, it looked like it was quite worth it. He didn't waste any more time, and walked out of the alleyway. 20 minutes later, Meg arrived at a detective agency that sold maps. He stroked his beard gently, and pushed the door open. 20 minutes later, Mag was escorted out of the door by a young man in a grey shirt with a warm smile on his face as he said, Mind your steps, old mister. I hope this information will be of use to you in your comprehensive history of the Norland continent. Ever since I was a child, I've always admired people with dreams like you. If you've finished writing about the Elven race, we have information about other races as well. The most recent information was only received a few days ago. All right, I'll come again next time. Meg looked at the young man and nodded. His voice was a little hoarse and weathered. He walked away slowly with a big bag under his arm. I haven't seen such a sucker in a long time. Sure enough, all the bards have holes in their brains. They dug it out themselves. The young man looked at Meg's receding figure, and shook his head with a smile as he shook the 2 dragon coins in his hand. He turned around and went back into the shop. After turning the corner, Meg's footsteps quickened. He looked down at the information under his arm with a smile on his face. 2 dragon coins for a set of information about the elves for the past 5 years. Although it wasn't top-secret information, Meg was still quite satisfied. This detective agency should be one of the more powerful private detective agencies in Chaos City. As for why he didn't go to Sherlock Detective Agency, it was mainly because Meg wasn't very confident in his acting skills. If he made a mistake, it would be asking for trouble. After finding a secluded alley, Mag asked the system to bring out the bicycle again. After changing into his own clothes, he enjoyed the system's 5-second makeup removal service. He opened his eyes and looked at his hands, which had returned to normal, and was in awe of the system's uncanny makeup skills. System, do you have any makeup experience bags for sale? Meg asked tentatively. Do you want to cross-dress? The system asked tentatively. Fuck off. Meg pursed his lips. He put his clothes and information into a big paper bag and put them in the basket of his bicycle. Then he rode his bicycle toward the Aiden Square. Ding! 20 copper coins have been successfully deducted, the system's voice sounded. System, it hasn't been an hour yet, right? It hasn't been an hour, so it'll be an hour, the system replied calmly. Meg stopped his bicycle in front of the Broad Employment Agency. There were still many people looking for jobs inside. Meg hesitated for a moment, but still locked his bicycle and walked inside. The most efficient way to find a worker was to go to a job agency. Meg didn't believe that there would be a good worker like Yarbemia who would fall into his lap for him to pick up. He just didn't know if the owner of the bird's nest had any suitable talents. Chapter 204. Sally didn't know how she arrived at the Aiden Square. She only remembered that she had nothing to do in the hotel after lunch, so she wandered around aimlessly. When she came back to her senses, she was already in the Aiden Square. She looked up and saw Meg riding a strange two-wheeled bicycle. Guanluo Employment Agency? Sally looked at the shop sign and frowned. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. Is he here to hire? She murmured to herself. No, there's already a half-dragon waitress in the restaurant. Sally quickly denied herself and continued to ponder with furrowed brows. After a while, she suddenly came to her senses, and her expression suddenly became a little strange. She thought to herself with confusion, why was I so happy when I heard that he might be hiring new employees? Do I really want to be a waitress in the restaurant? No. Absolutely not. I still have a dream. I have to travel to all of the places that Princess Irina walked to and see all of the sights that she saw back then. I want to stand at a place where I can stand on par with her. Sally shook her head vigorously and said to herself with a firm expression. But Sally's eyes gradually turned to the direction of Amy's. She slowly became confused again. The sweet tofu pudding is so delicious. The rainbow fried rice is so delicious. The dishes in the future. Sally stopped. She couldn't walk anymore. At this moment, she felt that her dreams were getting further and further away. Mr. Mack, I'll look for more candidates for you. If there's a good one, I'll leave it to you first. Half an hour later, a wry smile appeared on Crease's face as he escorted Mag out. Mag had been looking at all of them for another half an hour, but none of them caught his eye. If this continued, he felt like he was going to lose all of his hair. Thank you. Meg was a little embarrassed. A good waitress could improve the quality of the restaurant. For example, Yarbemia could bring good mood to the customers with her smile. However, a bad waitress could greatly reduce the customer's dining experience. Therefore, Meg's requirements for the waiters were quite high. It was better to have nothing than to have something substandard. Among the resumes that he looked at today, there were a few that were not bad. However, they were still a little lacking compared to Meg's expectations, so he did not decide. Let's not do this business. Chris muttered as he watched Meg slowly ride away on his bicycle. He then turned around to greet the other customers. After riding for a while, Meg turned his head slightly to look behind him. He sped up a little before slowing down again. Why are you following me? The bicycle stopped at the entrance of the restaurant. Meg got off and turned around to look at Sally, who was standing not far behind him, with caution and vigilance. The elves had stabbed Meg Alex in the back, and there was a document about the elves in his car basket. Although Sally had eaten in the restaurant twice, she had followed him all the way home today, so Meg was still a little wary of her. Sally's usually cold face was a bit nervous and embarrassed. She did not know why she had followed Meg all the way home. She slightly lowered her eyes and stayed silent for a while. Finally, she gathered her courage and looked up at Meg. She said seriously, if your restaurant needs an employee, I want to apply. Is that okay? Meg raised his eyebrows. He looked at Sally, who was wearing a light silver dress. She was tall and elegant. She was here to apply for a waitress position. How do you know that I want to hire a waitress? Meg was not fooled. Instead, he raised his guard a little. Judging from Sally's clothes and temperament, she was definitely not from a poor family. She was most likely the daughter of a big elf family. How could someone of her status come to a restaurant to apply for a waitress position? Yangju fried rice was grown with a branch of the spring of life. Maybe she was here for that. Or maybe it had something to do with what happened 3 years ago. In the blink of an eye, many doubts and speculations flashed through Meg's mind. Sally looked at Meg, who was frowning, and became even more nervous. She only had 12 dragon coins left in her pocket. A plate of Yangju fried rice cost 6 gold coins, and a plate of tofu pudding cost 8 gold coins. If she ate them every day, she would become a pauper in a few days. She did not want to go home right now, but she still wanted to eat delicious Yangju fried rice and tofu pudding. The only way Sally could think of was to work hard with her own hands. I just saw you go to the job agency. The restaurant is so busy, so I guess that you wanted to hire a new employee, Sally said quickly. Sally hurriedly explained. She was afraid that Mag would get suspicious, so she added, "That was when I began to follow you." I see. Meg's eyebrows relaxed a little. He looked at Sally again. Her light blonde hair was tied up in a neat ponytail. Her skin was fair, and her face was delicate. A pair of small pointy ears stood up on both sides of her head. Her light blue eyes made her look noble and cold. She was wearing a light silver dress embroidered with gold thread, revealing her delicate collarbone and a pair of slender white calves. With such an appearance and temperament, she was more than qualified to be a waitress in a restaurant, and could bring pleasure to the eyes of the customers. However, the restaurant did not need a dispensable vase. Meg planned to hire a new employee to share Yabemia's work and improve the efficiency of the restaurant's ordering. As his fitness improved, so did his cooking speed. When the time came, he might be able to cook 5 or 6 pots of Yangju fried rice at the same time. Ability was what he valued most. If a man was looking at her like this, Sally would definitely stare back at him. If she was still being stared at, she would not mind letting him have a taste of her bow and arrow. But now, Meg was looking at her. There was no lust in his eyes. It was more like he was examining her. Sally hesitated for a while, then looked up at Meg and said, "I don't need a salary. As long as I can have 1 serving of tofu pudding every day." 1 serving of tofu pudding? Meg raised his eyebrows. This girl is so easy to satisfy. Looking at Sally's expectant eyes, Meg seemed to understand why she wanted to be a waitress. Chapter 205. Really? Sally's face lit up, but the only response she got was the sound of the restaurant's bell ringing as the door closed. Sally's mouth fell open as she looked at the closed door. For some reason, she felt a little ridiculous. With her status and looks, she had never been ignored by a man like this before. However, when she thought about the delicious food Meg made and the calm expression on his face when he turned down the 2 magic casters' request for another helping of tofu pudding, she felt that it was reasonable. If a genius was the same as an ordinary person, then he wouldn't be a genius. Meg didn't think too much about it. No matter what Sally's status was, since she was here to apply for a job, he would treat her the same. "Boss, do you need my help?" Yabemia, who was wiping the floor, saw Meg walk in with the bicycle, and hurriedly put the dry mop aside. "No need, you can continue. There's someone outside who wants to apply for a job." Meg shook his head with a smile. After his body recovered, it was a piece of cake for him to pick up a carbon fiber bicycle. Applying for a job? Yabemia was a little surprised. He didn't expect someone to come so soon. He wondered who he would be working with in the future. Sally lowered her head and tidied her long dress. She looked at the wooden door and took a deep breath. She reached for the doorknob and gently pushed it. The bell hanging on the door tinkled lightly. Yabemia turned around and looked at the door. Even though there was a bit of backlight, he still saw Sally standing at the door, and his mouth fell open involuntarily. Sally was wearing a light silver dress, and her body seemed to be covered in a layer of hazy and dazzling light. Her small pointy ears seemed to be transparent under the light, and her beautiful face and light blue eyes were so elegant and noble. She was like a goddess who had descended from the heavens. This kind of innate temperament made Yabemia feel a little ashamed and a little envious. Sally was also looking at Yabemia. Her facial features were delicate and adorable, and there was a pair of cute little dragon horns on her head. Her golden and black eyes looked quite strange. His gaze couldn't help but linger on her chest for a moment. Looking at the perfectly stretched maid uniform, he suddenly felt a little envious. He didn't know if he was envious of the fullness of her breasts or the fact that after wearing this uniform, he could work at Mammoth and eat a lot of delicious food. Or perhaps, both. The two of them stood facing each other, envious of each other. Yarbemia was the first to come back to his senses. He quickly hid the mop behind him and said awkwardly, Guest, we're already closed. You, drink some water first. The restaurant will be very busy during mealtime. There are some things that I need to clarify with you first. Meg came out with 2 glasses of water. He handed one to Yarbemia and placed the other on the table beside him. He looked at Sally and nodded. Okay. Sally's expression quickly calmed down. She walked to the table and sat down. Looking at the transparent crystal glass on the table, she didn't rush to drink the water. Instead, she sat upright and waited for Meg to speak. Her hands were clasped together under the table. She. Yarbemia shook the glass in his hand and looked at Sally in disbelief. Yes, she came to apply today. Meg nodded with a smile. He was also a little shocked by Sally's words. Hello. Yarbemia also realized that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly nodded at Sally. The glass in his hand shook, and some of the water spilled onto the floor. Hello. Sally also nodded slightly in response. MIA, drink some water first before we finish. Meg didn't know why Yarbemia was so nervous, but he said gently. Okay, boss. Yarbemia nodded and drank 2 sips of water. He then continued to mop the floor. The restaurant is getting busier and busier. MIA can't handle it alone, so I want to hire another waiter to share some of her work. Meg pulled out a chair and sat across from Sally. He looked into her eyes and continued, a waiter's job includes receiving orders, serving dishes, cleaning the table, collecting money, and cleaning the restaurant after the customers leave. How many jobs do you think you can do? I want a capable employee, not a pretty vase. Sally listened to Meg's words. The surprise on her face became more and more obvious. She couldn't help but point at Yarbemia and ask, before this, did she do all these things alone? Yes. Mag nodded. After saying that, he also felt that he was a little like a capitalist who exploited his employees, so he added, Mia is a good employee. Indeed. Sally nodded in agreement. She had to take orders and serve dishes for so many customers and clean the table in the process. She couldn't make any mistakes in the order of each customer's order and dishes. This was an amazing talent. At least, she didn't think she could do it. Yarbemia, who was mopping the floor, smiled and moved faster. Meg looked at Sally quietly, waiting for her to give her opinion. She's better than anyone at taking orders and serving dishes. Sally looked at Yarbemia with a hint of admiration in her eyes. She then turned to Mag and sincerely said, I think I can try to collect money and clean the tables, and I can do all of the cleaning in the restaurant. How's your math? Meg asked curiously. I can remember all the multiplication tables, Sally answered confidently. Good. Let's move on to the next one. Meg stood up and walked to the kitchen. After a while, he came out with a stack of plates and bowls. There were 1 to 4 bowls and plates on each table. Some of them even had bags of Ruggiamo. The first table on the far left of the door will be counted as the first table. Arrange them vertically, from 1 to 16. Later, I will randomly pick a few tables as a test. You have to quickly complete the bill according to the plates on the table and clean the table at the same time. Can you do that? Meg put the last plate on the table and looked at Sally, who had also stood up. I'll try my best. Sally nodded. She tried to look calm, but she couldn't hide the nervousness in her eyes. Yarbemia stood by the door with the mop in her hand. She looked at Meg in surprise. She had passed a similar test to become a waitress in the restaurant. She had thought that with Sally's appearance and temperament, Meg would hire her directly. She didn't expect that the test still depended on ability. Chapter 206. Good luck, Yarbemia said silently, clenching her fists. Sally quickly picked up the tray and walked to table 3. Looking at the bowls, plates, and 2 bags on the table, she thought for about 30 seconds and said, 4 bowls of Yeongju fried rice, 3 tofu puddings, and 2 rujiamos. That's 36 gold coins in total. After that, she started to clean up the table. Plates, bowls, and bags were piled up randomly on the tray, and then she quickly walked to the next table. That won't do. Yarbemia looked at the plates and bowls on Sally's tray anxiously. Meg didn't say anything. He also looked at the plates in Sally's hands. No matter what you do, the foundation is very important. Cleaning up the table is just a small thing, and you should follow the same principle. On the second table, Yarbemia called out the amount she was supposed to charge within 30 seconds. The bowls and plates were stacked even higher, but she had a good sense of balance. Even after 2 layers of bowls and plates were stacked, they still didn't fall. It took Sally less than 3 minutes to go through 3 tables in a row. By the time she reached the 4th table, the half-meter-tall stacks of bowls and plates were wobbling slightly in her hands, as if they were about to topple over at any moment. That's 16 gold coins in total. Sally paused for a second. She picked up a bowl and put it on top of the table with a serious expression. She accidentally touched one of the stacks of bowls. The 2 stacks of bowls, which were half a person's height, finally lost their balance and fell to the sides at the same time. The plates and bowls fell to the ground one by one like dumplings. "Watch out!" Yarbemia shouted. She dropped the mop in her hand and ran to Sally. Meg was also a bit surprised. He took a step forward unconsciously. "Stop!" A hint of panic also appeared on Sally's face. She pointed a finger with her left hand, and a ribbon-like pillar of water appeared around her. The pillar of water revolved around her, catching all of the dishes that had fallen to the ground, and not a single one of them fell to the ground. Amazing. Yarbemia stopped running and looked at the plates and bowls that were circling Sally. Her mouth was slightly open as she watched this amazing scene. A water mage. A hint of surprise also appeared in Mag's eyes. She was at least a 5th-tier magic caster. A 5th-tier knight could already become the deputy general of an army of 500 knights, so a 5th-tier magic caster was on the same level as a 5th-tier magic caster. Why was she applying to be a waitress? "You still have 1.5 minutes. Meg still raised his hand to remind her. Sally, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, immediately became nervous again. She controlled her water magic to place the plates and bowls back onto the tray before making her way over to the last table. The stacked plates wobbled a little, but with the water ribbon around them, there was no danger of them falling to the ground. 22 gold coins in total. Sally finished calculating the bill for the last table. She waved her hand, and the plates and bowls on the table were swept up by a stream of water. They were all stacked to the top of the table, and now they were as tall as a person. 4 servings in 30 seconds. Meg looked at his watch and nodded. Amazing. Yarbemia looked up at the dishes that were stacked so high that they almost reached the ceiling, and she couldn't help but gasp in amazement. "Did I pass?" Sally looked at Meg expectantly. She was happy but nervous at the same time. "You finished all the tasks within the time limit, paid correctly, and put away all the utensils." Meg looked at Sally, who was gradually smiling, and changed his tone. "But, your performance was too amateur. I don't ask for too much from the customer's attitude. As long as the customer doesn't dislike you, the rest is up to you. Just don't look too rushed. Also, the plates are not stacked like this." Mag's lips twitched, and he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Sally was most likely the only person who could do such a thing. Tables 2 and 7 and 14 and 16 and 4. MIA, you show us how to pay and clean up the table. Meg didn't give Sally a chance to speak. He looked directly at MIA and said, "Okay." Mia nodded. She quickly went into the kitchen and came out with another tray. Then, she paid the bill according to the order that Mag had just told her. She put the plates and bowls in a stack, and everything was done in less than 3 minutes. The bowls and plates were separated and stacked less than half a meter high. The bags of rujiamo were placed neatly at the side. So fast. Sally looked at Yarbemia in disbelief. She was more than twice as fast as she was, and she was smiling the whole time. She didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. Sally looked at the trays in their hands. They were almost the same number of plates, but they gave off a completely different feeling. Sally was a bit frustrated. She was indeed unprofessional. You just haven't mastered the technique. It's already very impressive that you can do this for the first time. Yarbemia hurriedly waved her hand when she saw Sally's expression. But Sally's eyes lit up again. She looked at Meg hesitantly. It's indeed not bad for the first time. Mag nodded in agreement. If all those bowls had been smashed, Mag would have kicked her out of the restaurant. However, her watertype magic was very intelligent, and it proved that even though this maiden wasn't a professional, her ability to adapt to situations was not bad. Her abilities were sufficient. Also, it would be a wonderful experience for the customers to have an elf waitress who could use magic. One was a lively half-dragon waitress, and the other was an elegant and noble elf waitress. It would be very interesting just thinking about it. As for stacking plates, that wasn't a problem at all. Mag could see that Sally had a lot of potential in her. Of course, more importantly, Meg saw the desire for this job in her eyes, which was similar to Yarbemia's. Yarbemia wanted to survive, while Sally wanted to eat good food. Depriving a foodie of the right to eat good food was almost the same as killing her. Therefore, the two were indeed similar. If he had mastered the 9x9 table, he would have been able to complete the calculations quickly. If he had mastered the 9x9 table, he would have been able to settle the bill even faster. Can she stay? Yarbemia looked at Meg expectantly. Sally looked at her gratefully, and also looked at Meg expectantly. One more question. You just said that you can do all the cleaning in the restaurant. The tables, chairs, the floor, and even the walls have to be cleaned. Are you sure you can do it? Meg looked at Sally doubtfully. Chapter 207. Following Sally's melodious incantation, the restaurant was flooded from the bottom to the top, as if a dam had been released. Only the area where Meg, Yarbemia, and Yarbemia were standing was blocked by a protective barrier. System, can you rebuild the restaurant? Meg asked in his mind as he looked at the flooded restaurant. Rebuilding cost 10,000 gold coins, the system answered without hesitation. 0 down payment. Meg raised his eyebrows. No. The system only accepts cash transactions, the system said seriously. That top-notch Land Rover from 2 days ago. Meg curled his lips. Because, you can't afford it. The system's voice seemed to reveal a strong sense of regret. Don't worry, I won't buy any of these luxury items in the future, Meg said calmly. The system can provide 6 interest-free periods of 0 down payment for all luxury items, bags, furs, luxury cars. The system's voice suddenly sounded a little anxious. A luxury car works too. Mag's eyes lit up. Luxury car interior decoration, the system corrected itself. I don't even have a second-hand Alto. No, get out. Mag rolled his eyes as he looked at the restaurant that had become an underwater world in the blink of an eye. Indeed, he couldn't praise the restaurant. That praise had given him the ability to summon wind and rain. Once the flood receded, the restaurant would have to close for repairs. The restaurant won't be gone, right? Yarbemia looked around nervously and thought to himself. Whoosh. The flood came and went quickly. It didn't rush out of the restaurant, but rather, it seemed to have opened a hole in space and sucked away all the water that filled the restaurant. Everything returned to normal. Nothing in the restaurant had moved, but it was as if there was a layer of light on the surface. Meg and Yarbemia looked at the newly renovated restaurant and couldn't help but gulp. The tables and chairs were glowing under the light, and even the air seemed to be fresher and a little moist. This is amazing. Yarbemia looked at the restaurant in amazement and touched the table lightly. And it's so dry. There's no moisture at all. Meg walked to the wall and looked at the mural carefully. It wasn't damaged at all. He reached out and touched it. There was no moisture at all. It was hard to imagine that just a second ago, the entire restaurant was submerged in the flood, and in the blink of an eye, there wasn't a single trace of moisture on the surface. Everything looked brand new. There was no more thorough cleaning than this. Even the corners of the tables were cleaned. Could it be that there's a spell more suitable for cleaning than this? Mag raised an eyebrow as he looked at Sally as if she were a precious treasure. Hygiene and safety were the foundation of a restaurant. Sally lowered her hand and explained in a soft voice, "The water will only take away the dust and dirt on the surface, but it won't corrode the items themselves. Furthermore, it will also take away excess moisture, so the tables and chairs will be able to maintain the optimum moisture ratio." So, Mag and Yarbemia were a little uneasy, as if her water-type magic had frightened them a little. "You can come to work tonight. Your salary and benefits are the same as Mia's. 4,000 copper coins a month and 1,200 copper coins a day. You can order whatever you want." Mag interjected before Sally had a chance to finish her sentence. She nodded with satisfaction, and it seemed that he had found another treasure today. "Really?" Sally's eyes lit up. She looked at Meg in surprise. Her cold face couldn't hide the joy. She only made 600 copper coins a month working in the hotel, but Meg was offering her 4,000 copper coins a month. More importantly, 1,200 copper coins a day. That was 2 plates of Yeongju fried rice or 6 plates of tofu pudding. Her dream of eating delicious Yeongju fried rice and tofu pudding every day had come true just like that. She still felt like she was in a dream. She pinched herself secretly with her hand that was hanging by her thigh. Only when she felt the pain from her thigh did she believe that she had really been hired by Mag, but that's too much. I only need 1 plate of tofu pudding." Sally looked at the bowl in her hand. She looked at Meg and shook her head embarrassedly. "I can't do anything right now. I might even cause trouble for the restaurant. I can't take so much. I think you're worth it." Meg shook his head with a smile. Meg had decided to keep her because of her ability to clean. She could get paid easily. As long as Yarbemia taught her how to clean the table, it shouldn't be a problem. He liked this second employee very much. She was indeed capable. Sally still wanted to say something. "Put the plate down and take a seat first. I'll go and get you some work clothes. You can ask Mia some questions about your work." Mag turned and went upstairs right away. He took the packet of documents from the basket on the way. Sally watched Meg disappear around the corner. Her mouth was slightly open. She was happy, but also a little embarrassed. She felt like she had taken advantage of Meg. "Congratulations. Your magic is so powerful." Yarbemia looked at Sally with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Sally was beautiful, elegant, and capable of such powerful magic. In contrast, all she had was brute strength. What did a girl need so much strength for? She couldn't help but feel a little sad. "I think you're the one who's awesome. You can do so many things on your own without being flustered at all. If I were you, the restaurant would be in chaos." Sally was also looking at Yarbemia with admiration in her eyes. She had only been cleaning up the tables, yet she had created such a mess. In contrast, Yarbemia had taken care of everything on her own, but she had still managed to do everything in an orderly manner and take care of all of the customers. The two looked at each other and smiled at the same time. It turned out that they both had their own strengths in each other's eyes. It was indeed a strange thing. Can I ask you how to clean the table faster and more orderly?" Sally asked Yarbemia. "My name is Yarbemia. You can call me Mia. We're colleagues from now on. You don't have to be so formal with me. Cleaning the table is actually very simple." Yarbemia smiled as she helped Sally remove the plates from the tray. She then taught her how to separate the plates from the bowls. She then placed the plates on the tray so that they could lean against each other more securely. Sally listened attentively to Yarbemia's lecture like a student. She would ask Yarbemia about things that she didn't understand, and Yarbemia would answer all of her questions to the best of her ability. Sally had initially been feeling a little self-conscious and unconfident, but under Yarbemia's admiring gaze, she became even more confident. Chapter 208. Warning. The level of the restaurant is too low. The host's authority is insufficient. Level 1 is not enough to recruit a second waitress. Please reject the waitress's request and upgrade the restaurant as soon as possible to obtain more authority. The system's serious voice sounded with a strong sense of warning. System, I'm here to buy clothes. Meg curled his lips. If the host rejects the waitress's request, then you don't have to buy clothes, right? The system seemed to be a little confused. Why should I reject her? Meg asked, a little puzzled. Host, please pay attention to every word the system says, okay? Every word the system says has a deep meaning. Maybe it contains the opportunity to reach the pinnacle of life. If you miss it, you'll regret it for life. The system was a little flustered and exasperated. I say, your level of authority is too low. Please upgrade the restaurant's level first, then you can unlock the second waitress authority. You can express your opinion, but I won't listen. Meg smiled calmly and said, System, you have to remember that most of the time, you're just a vegetable seller. I'm the owner of the restaurant. Whether I buy your vegetables or not depends on my mood. You're just a vegetable seller, why do you have so many requirements? Can't you just sell your vegetables properly? Host. The system's voice suddenly rose a little. Also, what does the level of authority of the restaurant have to do with me? You didn't provide the waitress for me. Did you pay her a salary? Or did you make delicious food for her? I used my own ability to earn the money and hire the waitress. What right do you have to ask me not to hire her? Meg interrupted the system's words and calmly threw out 3 questions in a row. I actually have nothing to say. The system suddenly became dejected. System, come out and sell women's clothes. Meg curled his lips. How dare this little thing be mischievous with me? Even if I can't argue with the customer, it's still quite fun to argue with the system. Pictures of neatly arranged kyongsams immediately popped up in Meg's mind. He simply looked at the pictures and skipped over them. Was he that kind of boss? All the way down, Mag's gaze landed on a porcelain white cheongsam with some blue floral embellishments, and his eyes lit up instantly. The porcelain white cheongsam was dignified and elegant, and there was a circle of refreshing blue floral embellishments on the hem and cuffs. There were a few simple blue floral embellishments on the collar that extended down a little, outlining a few elegant lines. The lower hem reached her knees, and the slit was just right to reveal a trace of her white and tender thighs. It didn't affect her walking, and it looked like a simple and elegant blue and white porcelain. It was full of Chinese style. It should suit her well. Meg nodded with satisfaction. Sally's elegance and nobility were even better than the models in the pictures. Her aura was completely suitable for this cheongsam. After that, Mag continued to flip through the list before ordering a silver chipao with golden trimmings. The design appeared to be similar to the silver dress that Sally was currently wearing, except it was a chipao. In that case, if Sally didn't like the white chipao, this one shouldn't be too much of a problem. As for the shoes, Meg ordered 2 pairs of black leather shoes with short heels. Looking at the pictures, this should be a good match for the cheongsam. As for the black stockings, Meg hesitated and chose to give up. This is not good, right? Of course, the main reason was that he did not have enough budget. He had just spent 10,000 gold coins in the morning, and spent another sum on the materials in the afternoon. He could not even afford the stockings at noon. This money-hungry system only accepted cash. That's it. System, customize it. Mag nodded with satisfaction. He didn't intend to turn the restaurant into a maid's restaurant in the first place, so he wouldn't use the maid's uniform as a fixed uniform. It was also fun to customize the uniform according to each employee's characteristics. Ding. 2 Tianxian silk kyongsams, 2 pairs of Sanar Bison soft leather shoes, 30 gold coins in total. Fee deducted successfully. Ding. Customization in progress. The goods will be delivered in 5 minutes. Please confirm the receiving location. Just on the bed. Meg said casually. He walked to the table and sat down. He opened the package on the table, but before he started, a small yellow envelope fell out and landed on the ground. Meg bent down and picked it up. It was a palm-sized yellow craft paper envelope. The seal was sealed with a piece of yellow mud, probably to prevent it from being opened. Top secret. Mag flipped the envelope over, and saw the 2 words written in red on it. He frowned. He looked at the bag full of documents on the table, and then at the unopened envelope in his hand. His eyes lit up instantly. Could it be that that person was in a hurry to pack it up for me, and accidentally threw a top-secret letter into the bag as well? Let's see what kind of top-secret letter it is. Meg's interest was piqued. He picked up the envelope and knocked it on the table. The yellow mud on the envelope was broken, and he dumped it into the trash can. Then, he slowly cut open the envelope with a metal ruler. There was only one piece of paper in the envelope. Meg took it out, put the envelope aside, and began to read it carefully. The letter was written in the common language of the continent. The handwriting was a little messy. It seemed that the person who wrote the letter was in a hurry to send it out. According to reliable sources, the eldest daughter of the Brewster family, Sally Brewster, ran away from home more than 30 days ago. Her whereabouts are still unknown. She should be heading south. She might be in Chaos City now. The great elder of the elves, Lady Helena, proposed to the Queen about 20 days ago that Sally Brewster should be the new elven princess. The Council of Elders is 80% in favor of this proposal. Meg looked at the information in his hand. His eyes were getting bigger and bigger, and his expression became more and more strange. Fuck. What kind of sin have I committed? Do I have a grudge against the elves? Meg put down the information in his hand slowly. He couldn't hide the shock on his face. There wasn't much information on the paper, but based on the current situation, it was obvious that Sally was the eldest daughter who ran away from home. She was a future elven princess. The elven princess Irina gave birth to Amy for him. Now, the future elven princess Sally was a waitress in his restaurant. Meg fell into deep thought. How did the elves offend him in his previous life? Why was it that she couldn't get over this hurdle? According to the secret letter, the Brewster family and the Elven royal family were both sending people to look for Sally. The search had covered almost the entire continent. It was highly confidential. He just didn't know what kind of expression those elf clan experts would have when they finally found out that the elf princess they were looking for was actually working as a waitress in a small restaurant. It'll probably be very interesting. Meg couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 209. Young Master Blower, the chief would like to see you. On a mountain peak in the wind forest, a middle-aged elf who was dressed as a butler looked up at the young elf lying on a tree branch with a complex expression. The young elf appeared to be around 18 or 19 years of age. He was wearing a blue and white robe with his collar open. He had an oval face, thin eyebrows, and an extremely handsome face. In particular, his almond-shaped eyes seemed to be even more alluring than those of ordinary women. If a man's appearance could be described as beautiful, then this was the perfect description for him. He was extremely beautiful. He was leaning lazily against a tree branch with one hand supporting his head. His legs were very long, and his body was very well proportioned and fit, as if he were weightless. Hearing the voice, he slowly opened his eyes after a while. His faint golden eyes didn't show the slightest bit of annoyance at being disturbed. He lowered his head to look at the butler, and asked in a somewhat lazy manner, "Butler Mulder, does father want something?" "Master didn't say anything. He only wants you to go and see him. He received a letter from Chaos City today." Maud shook his head in response. Chaos City. A hint of light suddenly flashed through Blower's lazy eyes, but it quickly faded. He leaped down from the treetop and strode forward as he said, "I won't wait for you, Butler Maud. It would be bad if all of the young women who have been seduced by me turned their attention to you." Maud shook his head in a resigned manner as he looked at Blower's departing figure. However, thinking back to what had happened in the past, he couldn't help but slow down a little. All of those infatuated elven maidens weren't interested in an old man like him. Instead, they were all asking him where they could meet young Master Blower again. Thank God I went to buy the information in disguise. Otherwise, I would be in deep trouble. Mag tore the secret letter and the envelope into pieces slowly, and flushed them down the toilet in the washroom. There wasn't much information about Irina in the information. After all, it was a package, so Meg didn't have much expectations. That secret letter was already a pleasant surprise, and it was worth the price of 2 dragon coins. After all, it was sealed in the elf race. However, now that Sally had become a new employee of the restaurant, it shouldn't be too difficult to get some information about the elven race from her. This girl seemed like she could be settled with one helping of tofu pudding. If that wasn't enough, he would make 2. Ding. The goods have been delivered, please sign for it. The system's voice sounded. Meg turned around and looked at the 4 brown paper bags on the bed. He walked over and looked at the bags. The color was not bad, not much different from the pictures. Or rather, it was better than the pictures. Heavenly profound silk. Meg reached out and touched the material of the cheongsam. The system seemed to have mentioned it before. The profound sky silk is a special kind of silk from the profound sky island. There is a kind of extremely tough profound sky grass there. The profound sky silkworms eat this kind of profound sky grass to grow up. The silk they spit out is smooth and elastic. Moreover, it is very tough and does not wear out easily. Bison from Sunol Island have many natural enemies. They live in an extremely harsh environment, and their bodies are much stronger than ordinary bison. Their meat is too stiff and sour to be eaten. However, the leather is of the highest quality. The shoes made from it are soft and durable, and it doesn't stink. It's the best choice for traveling. The system's voice sounded. It's quite comfortable to touch. Meg nodded. It was slightly cool to the touch, and the texture was smoother than ordinary silk. It was soft with a bit of toughness, and it could perfectly support the shape of the cheongsam. He wasn't sure how it would look, but the system had customized the clothes and shoes according to Sally's figure, so he didn't have to worry about it. Meg carried the bags downstairs. The conversation between Yarbemia and Sally had already stopped. They were sitting opposite each other awkwardly. There was a big difference between their values, and values. Neither of them was good at chatting. After talking about the restaurant's work, they didn't know how to start a new topic to continue the conversation. Hearing the footsteps coming downstairs, the two stood up at the same time and looked behind the counter with expectation. Is this the same as Mia's? Sally had a good taste. The black and white dress looked pretty. Although it didn't match her, she would still be happy to wear it if it was a work uniform. Mag handed the paper bag in his hand to Sally with a smile, and said, "Here's your uniform and shoes. You'll officially start work at 7 a.m. tomorrow. If you have other things to take care of, you can come back after you've settled them." His attitude had softened significantly. This guy and his nominal wife, whom he had never met, were both heirs to the throne of the Elf Queen. Of course, he had always been kind to the employees in his restaurant. "Thank you." Sally took the bags. It was rare to see someone put clothes in such a delicate paper bag. Did Meg do it himself? Furthermore, Mag had taken the clothes from upstairs, so wouldn't the size be a little inappropriate? If it didn't fit or was too big, wouldn't it be too weird to wear it? Could it be that Mag had also made these clothes himself? Many thoughts flashed through Sally's mind. She took the bags and looked down, and her eyes lit up. One was porcelain white and blue, and the other was light silver and gold. They were all her favorite colors, but they were stacked in the box. She couldn't tell what style they were, but the color and the smooth material made her feel comfortable wearing them at first glance. "It looks different from mine. You'll look good in it." Yarbemia also saw a corner of the clothes in the box and said with a smile, "Okay." A smile also appeared on Sally's face. For the first time, she was looking forward to seeing a piece of clothing. She wanted to know what kind of clothing Mag was going to use for Yarbemia's work uniform, as he was able to design such a unique piece of clothing. "How should we address you?" Meg asked while looking at Sally with a smile. Since Sally was being hunted, it would be too conspicuous to use her original name. After all, the restaurant would only get more and more customers, and there would be more and more elven customers. It wouldn't be good if the news got out in a few days. Chapter 210. Aisha. Yarbemia murmured before nodding. "That's a nice name." "Thank you." Sally nodded. "All right, we'll call you Aisha, and I'm Meg. You can call me boss like Mia does." Meg nodded. It seemed that Sally was also aware of her situation. However, if she still wanted to work as a waitress in such a situation, It seemed that the temptation of delicious food was far greater than being captured. Yes, boss. Sally nodded. After working at Gaia Hotel for a while, she had already gotten used to being addressed as a waitress. She looked at the bag in her hand before turning to Meg. So, can I leave now? Of course. You just have to come to the restaurant at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Meg nodded with a smile. All right, goodbye. Sally nodded to Meg and Yarbemia before leaving gracefully. After the door closed, Yarbemia turned to Meg with a perplexed expression and asked, Boss, Aisha looks like an elegant young mistress. Why did she want to work as a waitress? Everyone has their own difficulties. If she doesn't want to talk about it, then I won't ask. Meg shook his head with a smile. Aisha was not just a young mistress, she could even be the future elven queen. Millimeter Hm. Yarbemia nodded obediently, and didn't say anything else. After Sally left, Meg changed into his chef's suit and began to prepare the ingredients. He had already obtained the recipe for the braised chicken, and all he had to do was enter the test field for the god of cookery at night. Amy came back from school at around 4:30 p.m., the same time as Chaos School. It seemed that Krasu had adapted to the local conditions to make it easier for Amy to get used to the pace of school. Ugly Duckling had been lying lazily on the counter for the entire afternoon. When it heard Amy's voice, it slid down the counter and bounced toward the door. It immediately ran to Amy's feet, and rubbed its little head against her leg as it meowed happily. It seemed that it had been bored of meowing at home all this time. Amy picked up Ugly Duckling, and weighed it in her arms as she said with a disdainful look, Ugly Duckling, why do I feel like you've gained weight again? Run 10 laps around the restaurant before you go to bed tonight. Meow. Ugly Duckling looked at Amy, and its eyes gradually widened as if it had heard something unbelievable. Run 10 laps, and not one less, Amy emphasized in a serious manner. Meow, meow, meow. Tilda Ugly Duckling pointed at the 2 small bowls beside the counter, then pointed at itself, then pointed at Amy. It copied Amy's actions, and drew circles on the bowls before shaking its head vigorously. That's right. I told you to eat 2 bowls for lunch, but I didn't tell you to run, right? Amy nodded, and then smiled sweetly as she said, but if you eat 1 bowl at night, you can still run 10 laps. Exercise before bed is good for losing weight. Meow. Ugly Duckling rolled its eyes, and fainted in Amy's arms. How terrifying. Sure enough, even the punctuation marks on Amy's words couldn't be trusted. In the kitchen, Meg, whose hands were full of flour, looked at Amy, who was standing at the door with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and asked, Are you happy on your first day of school? Amy nodded repeatedly, and said happily, Yes, yes. I'm super happy. There are so many children, and they all think I'm a little witch, and want me to play with them. So, I have to work hard to learn magic. Only then can I become a real little witch. Millimeter M, as long as you're happy. Meg smiled. He had been worried that Amy would find learning magic too boring. After all, Luna had mentioned this before. However, it seemed that he had been worrying too much. If Amy liked it enough, she could also find joy in it. By the way, Father, did you recruit any pretty girls today? Amy asked Meg expectantly. Yes, and you've seen them before. Meg nodded. Really? I've seen them before? Amy thought seriously, and her eyes suddenly lit up. Could it be Auntie Floral Apron? Auntie Floral Apron is going to open her own restaurant. There's no way she'll come back to be our waitress. Meg shook his head with a smile, and said, You'll know who she is when she comes back tomorrow afternoon. All right, I'm sure it'll be a girl as pretty as Big Sister MIA. Amy nodded expectantly, and didn't ask any more questions. She took out the music box with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and invited Yarbemia, who also had nothing to do for the time being, to come and learn how to dance. The shutters were already down, so they didn't have to worry about prying eyes from outside. Meg looked at the 2 little girls outside, who were dancing more and more, and a smile appeared on his face. It suddenly occurred to him that if Sally joined them, they could form a 3-person dance group. Perhaps they could even perform on the stage on Peace Memorial Day. A Cheongsam, a maid, and a little lowly dancing together. It'll be hard for them not to get first place, right? Meg thought to himself. He also thought it would be a very interesting scene. However, with Sally's aloof personality, she probably wouldn't join them. They probably wouldn't be able to see it. In the evening, Amy had dinner with Meg and the others. They didn't have to worry about the sales of the tofu pudding anymore, so Amy didn't have to perform for the customers. She could eat it when the new dish was released. Ugly Duckling lay on the ground, looking a little unhappy. It seemed that it had already experienced the horror of running 10 laps around the restaurant before going to bed. Eat your food, Ugly Duckling. You'll only have the strength to lose weight when you're full. Amy put a small plate of Yeongju fried rice and 2 pieces of meat in front of Ugly Duckling. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling turned its head to the other side as if it were going on a hunger strike. It's going to be 10 laps anyway. Otherwise, don't even think about getting on my bed, Amy said calmly. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling meowed in despair. It turned its gaze back to the tofu pudding, fried rice, and meat in front of it. It sniffed with its nose, and then couldn't help but dig in. The more it ate, the happier it became. Father, Ugly Duckling, and I are going to watch the show. You guys take your time. She put the spoon gently on the plate and slid off the chair. She picked up Ugly Duckling, who was still licking the plate, and walked toward the door with a stool in her hand. Okay, I'm going to have a meal with you, Ugly Duckling said after finishing the 2 bowls of tofu pudding and Yeongju fried rice. During this time, Amy had gotten into the habit of carrying a small stool to the door to watch the sweet and savory parties quarrel before the restaurant opened. Should the tofu pudding be sweet or savory? Chapter 211. Meg's attitude was, as long as you don't destroy the restaurant, you can fight however you want. Do you think there's no space? That's fine, as long as I ask the Grey Temple for permission, I'll pay to build an arena for all of the angry customers to vent their frustrations. After all, this was a very eye-catching advertisement, and most importantly, he didn't have to pay for it. Yarbemia turned toward the door with a concerned look on her face, and asked, Boss, do we need to go and talk to the customers? MIA, if you were to go out, which side would you support, sweet tofu pudding or savory tofu pudding? Meg asked with a smile as he looked at Yarbemia, who was taking small bites of the sweet tofu pudding. Sweet tofu pudding is the best. Yarbemia replied without any hesitation. So you're going to be a fan of the sweet tofu pudding as soon as you go out. How are we going to talk to them? Meg couldn't help but chuckle. Oh, right. Yarbemia faltered slightly before blushing slightly. She turned to Meg and asked, if you go out, you'll also be a fan of the savory tofu pudding, right? We can choose the flavor that we like when we eat, but we can't show any favoritism when we receive customers. That's unprofessional behavior. Mag shook his head. He had seen through that very clearly recently. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Yarbemia nodded with an earnest expression. She had to keep that in mind. Even if she wanted to recommend sweet tofu pudding to the customers, she had to resist that urge and let them make their own choices. After Meg and Yarbemia finished their tofu pudding, they put away the small plates that Ugly Duckling had used. They slowly walked around the restaurant before raising the shutters and slowly opening the door. They could hear the sounds of quarreling in the restaurant, and they smiled as they said, "Welcome to the restaurant." Meg took a glance at the woman in the crowd. She was wearing a long black dress, a black cloak, and a veil. As expected, she was here again. He was quite curious to see if he would be able to see her come to dinner without a veil one day. He just glanced at me. Gloria looked at Meg, who was standing at the door with a smile on his face, and felt her heartbeat quicken. Meg had expected to be busy in the evening. In order to take care of Yarbemia, he deliberately slowed down his cooking speed. When Sally officially started work tomorrow, the efficiency would increase again. The busy night lasted until the end of business. At 9 o'clock, there were still many people who wanted to have supper, but they were all declined by Meg. For supper, of course, barbecue skewers, hot pot, beer, and the like would go well with it. Besides, Amy still had to go to school tomorrow morning, so she had to go to bed early. MIA, clean up the dishes today and go back. When Aisha comes tomorrow, ask her to clean up the dishes with magic. It's fast and easy. Meg said with a smile as he looked at Yarbemia, who was taking out a mop and cloth to clean up the restaurant. But Yarbemia looked at Mag. She wanted to say something, but stopped with a conflicted expression. "Mia, do you have something you want to say to me?" Meg looked at her with a perplexed expression. No. Yarbemia hesitated momentarily before shaking her head. "All right, then I'll leave you to your work. I'll take Amy and Ugly Duckling upstairs to sleep. They're already asleep, so just close the door when you leave." Meg nodded with a smile. He picked up Amy, who was already asleep, and Ugly Duckling, who was sleeping on her lap, before making his way upstairs. "All right." Mia nodded as she watched Meg make his way upstairs. She looked at the cloth in her hand, and hesitated momentarily before cleaning up the dishes and wiping down the table. Meg placed Amy and Ugly Duckling on their little beds before taking a comfortable bath. When he went downstairs again, Yarbemia had already gone back. The restaurant was clean and tidy, and the floor had been mopped once again. It was very clean and shiny. "Looks like this little girl really does have something on her mind." Meg looked at the clean restaurant, and murmured to himself. He made his way to the door, locked it, and turned off the lights before going upstairs. He cast this matter to the back of his mind for now, and lay down on his bed before opening the braised chicken experience bag. A burst of information flowed into Meg's mind, and was quickly absorbed by him. The experience bag of the best braised chicken was fused with Meg's memories just like that. "Looks like it's not as difficult as I thought it would be." Meg pushed open the door to the trial field, and the darkness behind him instantly disappeared. He found himself in a one-to-one kitchen. Frying pan, large casserole pot, ingredients, condiments. Millimeter chem, everything's here. Meg looked at the two new kitchenware that had appeared on the stove, and then looked through the fridge before nodding with satisfaction. Braised chicken could be considered a true dish in the restaurant now, and the steps and difficulty had indeed increased. However, Meg was no longer the same rookie who didn't even know how to hold a kitchen knife. Furthermore, after his body had recovered, his body had automatically adjusted itself to be the same as it was in the outside world, so he was able to handle everything in the kitchen. "Let's make a serving for one first," Meg murmured to himself as he pulled open the section of the fridge where the chicken drumsticks were stored. "System, what kind of fucking chicken drumstick is this?" Meg couldn't help but exclaim. There were only 10 drumsticks in the large compartment of the fridge. Or rather, they shouldn't even be called drumsticks. They were more like drumsticks that had been enlarged by 10 times. The skin was golden red, and the large compartment was filled to the brim with only 10 drumsticks. These are drumsticks from a first-tier magic beast, a fire chicken. Fire chickens are very common magic beasts on the Norland continent. They have a certain degree of aggression, and their meat is very tender. It has the effects of nourishing the body, nourishing the blood, and nourishing the kidneys. The fire chickens provided by the system were reared on a volcanic island that was just formed 10 years ago outside the Staro Sea, and the volcano is still in an active state. The system carried out ecological catalysis on the volcanic island to make the island's environment suitable for fire chickens to survive. The fire element brought by the active volcano promotes the fire chicken's growth and shortens its growth cycle. Mature fire chickens that grow in this environment are already able to defeat normal second-tier magic beasts. The nourishing effect of the chicken has increased by more than 3 times. At the same time, the fire element contained in the chicken is extremely effective for people with cold constitutions. It also has a certain special effect on men. It is a divine nourishing product. The system's voice sounded with a hint of pride. "Your special chicken rearing skills. I'm impressed. A first-tier magic beast can defeat a second-tier magic beast. Are you rearing a fighting chicken?" Meg's expression became a little strange as he listened to the system's explanation. He reached out and took out a large drumstick that was at least 1.5 kilograms. Chapter 212. After putting the drumstick aside, Meg took out a box of dried shiitake mushrooms from the cabinet. There were circles of white cracks on the surface of the shiitake mushrooms, making them look like blooming flowers. As soon as he opened the cabinet, a burst of unique fragrance of shiitake mushrooms rushed out, making him feel refreshed. Meg reached out and picked one up. The mushroom was about the size of 3 coins and was moderately thick. It was dry but not brittle. All the shiitake mushrooms in the box were almost the same size, and the patterns on the surface of the mushrooms were also similar. The dense fragrance was almost comparable to that of top-grade incense, which made him feel peaceful and comfortable. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "System, what's the origin of these shiitake mushrooms?" Shiitake mushrooms are also known as mushrooms and have the reputation of being the king of mountain delicacies. They taste delicious and have a refreshing aroma. Besides, they have the effect of recuperating appetite and reducing qi fatigue. They are the most important seasoning ingredient in the braised chicken dish and are indispensable. The shiitake mushrooms provided by the system are produced using the improved ancient mushroom growing method. In the depths of the wind forest, a subspecies of agarwood was selected from a dark and humid climate. Flowers were cut from the trees and cultivated. The water content of the trees was adjusted to provide the best growing conditions for the shiitake mushrooms. Every agarwood tree can grow more than 1,000 shiitake mushrooms. Among them, the mushrooms were selected to be plump, have perfect patterns, and are of standard sizes. Each tree can only produce about 100 shiitake mushrooms, all of which are top grade. The mushrooms have absorbed the fragrance of the agarwood. If 2 or 3 of them were placed in the room, the fragrance would fill the room and refresh the mind. If they were placed in the dishes, the fragrance would still be that of the mushrooms, but it would be much more delicious than ordinary shiitake mushrooms. The mushrooms have been cleaned before drying. The whole process of packaging and transportation is sterile and vacuum-packed without any preservatives or drying agents. They can be cooked and eaten directly, the system answered earnestly. "System, you are indeed serious about growing vegetables." Meg nodded his head earnestly and praised. Going to the wind forest to grow shiitake mushrooms with agarwood was probably something only the system could do. What if some elf was suddenly attracted by the fragrance one day and ran over to take a look only to find a agarwood tree full of thousands of shiitake mushrooms? What kind of expression would that elf have? However, the ingredients provided by the system were indeed top-notch. They were something that even the rich might not be able to eat. Meg didn't need to ask any questions. The system introduced the rest of the ingredients and condiments in detail. Although they didn't have as many origins as the turkey and shiitake mushrooms, they were all planted in strange places and were far better than ordinary ingredients. "All right, system, you can scram now. I'm going to start cooking seriously." After listening to the system's introduction, Mag was already filled with anticipation for this braised chicken. It appeared that this was going to be another nourishing dish. Of course, he was also looking forward to seeing just how delicious this braised chicken would be if it was cooked to perfection using the best ingredients. 1 large drumstick, 20 dried mushrooms, 3 large potatoes, 3 lettuce shoots, and 4 green peppers. Beside them were star anise, bay leaf, pepper, dried chili, ginger, and other spices. As for the condiments, salt, sugar, soy sauce, light soy sauce, and cooking wine were all prepared. Hey, system, you added a knife for me. The first step was to deal with the chicken drumstick. However, when Meg looked at the knife rack, he was stunned. Next to the Chinese kitchen knife on the knife rack, there was a kitchen knife with a golden edge on the back. The style was similar to the Chinese kitchen knife, but the blade was slightly narrower and about 3 centimeters longer. The edge of the blade looked extremely sharp. "Host, you can try using the original kitchen knife first," the system said calmly. Meg picked up the original kitchen knife and placed the chicken drumstick on the chopping board. He raised the kitchen knife and chopped at the drumstick. Ding! The kitchen knife cut through the chicken leg easily, but when it came into contact with the chicken bone, it felt as if it had cut through steel. A metallic sound rang out, and the kitchen knife almost flew out of Mag's hand, causing his hand to go numb. "System, what kind of monster did you raise?" Meg looked at the chipped kitchen knife in his hand and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Even the sharp kitchen knife had become like this. How was he going to chop the drumstick? As a level 1 magic beast, the hardness of the bones of a fiery chicken is naturally not comparable to that of an ordinary chicken. Knights spend a lot of money to buy weapons, not to be more beautiful. If you don't have a good weapon, you won't even be able to chop the drumstick. In the past, Meg Alex was able to slay a dragon with a sword. While he was powerful, the dragon-slaying sword also played a decisive role. As a candidate for the god of cookery, how can you not have a good knife? This golden edge kitchen knife is forged from the best tungsten steel. It is extremely sharp and hard. It can easily cut through the shells and bones of magic beasts below level 3. It is enough to deal with most of the ingredients at this stage. The reduced width of the knife reduces the bulkiness of the standard Chinese kitchen knife, and the slightly increased length. It is more suitable for the host's habits. It is a top-notch kitchen knife tailor-made for the host. Quickly pick up the golden edge kitchen knife and give it a try. Enjoy the sharpness of the knife. It is an extraordinary cooking experience. The system's cheerful voice sounded. Why do I feel that you are promoting it? Meg raised his eyebrows. He felt that the attitude of the system was a bit strange, but he still reached out and took the other kitchen knife hanging on the knife rack. The weight was about the same as the previous Chinese kitchen knife. The handle had a non-slip design, and the grip was very comfortable. Moreover, the width and length looked more comfortable. He held the drumstick with one hand, lifted the kitchen knife, and gently cut it with controlled strength. The chicken was cut open as if it was tofu. There was almost no resistance. With a slight cracking sound, the chicken thigh bone was cut open so easily. The meat of the chicken thigh was turned over, and the incision was even. There was no bone residue falling out, and traces of bone marrow were still hidden in the bone. Good knife. Meg's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but praise. Not only was it sharp, but the sense of compatibility with him was also unparalleled. Although it was the first time he used it, it was very handy. It was really special. Every chef must have a knife that suits them. A good knife, the system made it. The system said proudly. Meg was too lazy to pay attention to the smug system. He cut the chicken into pieces of uniform size, put them in a colander to wash away the blood, drained them, and put them in a big bowl next to him. He added seasoning and put them aside to marinate for a while. This would make the chicken more flavorful. Then he soaked the dried shiitake mushrooms in warm water. The amount of water added was just right, because the shiitake water needed to be reserved for later. Chapter 213. Braised Chicken and Rice. This rice was also very particular and could be considered the highlight of this dish. Without a good bowl of rice, how could the taste of the braised chicken be brought out? Originally, Meg thought that the system would continue to provide rice irrigated by the water of life to cook, but he rejected it on the grounds that the production was insufficient. Instead, the system provided a type of rice called moonlight rice. It was said that the system planted a new type of rice on Moonlight Island in the Starro Sea. There were many wetlands on the island, so the production was good. Moreover, because of the unique moonstone on the island that could absorb moonlight, this type of rice was particularly fragrant and sweet, and its taste was not inferior to the rice of life at all. Mag pulled open the cabinet. The original rice cabinet had been divided into two compartments from the middle. On the left was the crystal-clear rice of life, which gave off a faint smell of the spring of life. On the right was the moonlight rice, which was a little darker in color. Mag's eyes lit up when he reached out to grab a handful of rice grains and brought it to his eyes. The rice grains were also plump and crystal clear, but there was actually a small white crescent. Therefore, the rice grains in the cabinet were darker in color than the ones in the spring of life. This appearance. System, could it be that you also have the heart of a young girl? Meg couldn't help but laugh. Growing a moon in the rice, when those girls ate it, their hearts would probably explode, right? The system didn't answer Meg's question, but in a place that he didn't notice, a line of small words silently floated in his mind. Who doesn't have the heart of a young girl? Although it didn't have the magical effect of the rice of life, this type of rice that was exploding with the heart of a young girl was still quite satisfactory to Meg. Amy would probably like it very much. The washed rice was placed in the rice cooker to cook. The marinating time of the chicken was about an hour, but this time would be skipped in the test field for the god of cookery. The shiitake mushrooms were soaked until they were just right to soften, and the water was squeezed out before cutting them into strips. Therefore, when all the ingredients were ready, Meg's expression became particularly serious as he began to cook. He turned on the medium heat and poured the oil into the frying pan. A thin layer of oil covered the bottom of the pan. When the oil was slightly warm, he added 2 spoonfuls of sugar. The color of the sugar was slightly yellow. It was made by the system fusing the 100-flower honey into the white sugar. It had the fragrance of the 100-flower honey and the sweetness of the white sugar. As for the 100-flower honey, according to the system, it came from the 100-flower valley in the wind forest. There wasn't much of it, but he was developing a new 100-flower honey breeding base, so he could still keep up with the supply. The sugar was heated in the oil and quickly melted. The air was immediately filled with the fragrance of honey flowers. The sweet smell made people salivate. Mag poured a quarter of the sliced chicken drumstick into the pot before using a wooden spoon to stir-fry the chicken in the pot. He dyed the chicken caramel color evenly, and soon, the aroma of chicken began to waft out of the pot. When the skin of the chicken was slightly browned, he scooped the chicken onto a plate. After cleaning the frying pan, he poured in the same amount of oil and stir-fried the various spices one by one. After stir-frying for a while, he added cooking wine, old soy sauce, and light soy sauce and continued to stir-fry. After that, he added the prepared shiitake mushrooms. After stir-frying for a while, the fragrance of the mushrooms gushed out. The originally faint aroma of the chicken seemed to have been enhanced, and a rich aroma filled the air. This aroma is simply amazing. Meg's eyes lit up. Previously, when he heard the system's introduction, he didn't quite understand what it meant when it said that the aroma of the mushrooms had increased by several times. Now, he finally understood. Although the mushrooms were planted on agarwood, they didn't have any agarwood aroma. Instead, the aroma of the mushrooms was enhanced to the extreme. It could even enhance the aroma of other ingredients. After stir-frying for a while, Meg turned off the heat and poured all the chicken into the large casserole on the stove. If it was filled to the brim, this large casserole could probably cook 16 servings of braised chicken at the same time. After that, he poured the shiitake mushrooms into the casserole. This shiitake mushroom water was good stuff. The system had already guaranteed that the shiitake mushrooms could be eaten directly. Of course, he couldn't let it go to waste. After adding water to the chicken, he poured the potatoes and lettuce into the casserole and continued to cook. About 15 minutes after the water boiled, he opened the lid and poured the green and red peppers into the casserole. After that, he turned on the heat and collected the sauce. The aroma in the air seemed to have become thicker. The aroma of the chicken and shiitake mushrooms mixed together to enhance each other's freshness. Meg's nose was filled with the aroma. "I'm actually a little hungry." Meg raised an eyebrow. In the test field for the god of cookery, he wouldn't feel tired or hungry. However, when he smelled this alluring aroma, his foodie instincts began to deceive his body and stomach. Meg controlled the time. When the sauce had thickened, he opened the lid and stir-fried it a few times, mixing all the ingredients evenly together. After that, he turned off the heat and scooped out all the braised chicken in 2 brown casserole bowls. Golden chicken, dark brown shiitake mushrooms, yellow potato cubes, and green lettuce cubes were drizzled with 2 spoonfuls of thick red broth. Just like that, a bowl of fragrant braised chicken was born. System, how is it? Did I succeed on my first try? Meg put down the bowl of rice in his hands. The rice grains were clear and sparkling, but the small crescent moon in the middle of the rice seemed to have become whiter and clearer. It was as if the bowl had been filled with a small crescent moon. According to the system's requirements in my previous life, they are far from being met. 1. The shape and size of the chicken pieces were too random. Not every piece was the same size. 2. The cooking process was too rigid. The sugar on the surface of the chicken was stir-fried for too long. The taste was a little bitter. The cooking time was too long. The chicken was a little dry. 3. The temperature of the sauce was not controlled well enough. The sauce was too thick. The texture was too sticky. It was a little oily. The system's voice sounded in a rather strict manner. As expected, it's not that simple. Meg nodded thoughtfully. However, he didn't appear too disheartened. He threw the 2 bowls of braised chicken directly into the kitchen waste bin. As he washed the casserole, he reflected, that's right. If these problems aren't solved, How can I serve this dish to others? Halfway through the washing, he suddenly put down the bowl in his hands and muttered to himself in annoyance, "Why did I have such a cheap mouth back then?" If I remember correctly, there were 3 requirements for braised chicken, right? Who knows when I'll be able to leave this place? Earth's mini theater. An old man happily dialed a number while turning on the television. Hey, old Lee, hurry up and come take a look. That venomous tongue Shin's torture story is starting again. It wasn't easy to wait until the 4th episode. Hurry up, don't miss it. Alright. Look at the previous episode's trailer. This time, he's making my braised chicken again. Let's see how capable this kid is. I'll lock him up in a small dark room for half a year. I won't let him sleep from day to night. I'll make him make my braised chicken every day. If he doesn't meet his own requirements, I won't let him out. An angry voice came from the other end of the phone. Almost at the same time, the same scene appeared on thousands of televisions around the world. Hello, special broadcast viewers. Welcome to this episode of Venomous Tongue Shin's torture story. As you can see, Venomous Tongue Shin has been locked up in an airtight kitchen by me. His heart is filled with despair and fear. He wants to leave this place and not be completely obliterated. He only has one chance, and that is to listen to my orders and keep making braised chicken until the braised chicken meets his own requirements. Only then will he have the chance to temporarily leave this kitchen and take a breather. Please don't worry. Under my oppressive rule, he doesn't dare to resist in the slightest. He's like a marionette, living a muddle-headed life every day. I believe you'll see this scene. Chapter 214. Meg continued to cook and then refine the dish. Throughout the process, he maintained a serious attitude, completely unaffected by the system's vicious comments. Amy will definitely love this braised chicken. She'll be able to eat a lot of meat, Meg thought to himself, and his movements became even smoother. As the days passed, Meg's expression became calmer and calmer. He held the spoon in one hand and the pot in the other, and it was as if he had become one with them. His movements were smooth and harmonious. Mag turned off the heat and took the dish out of the pot. A bowl of glowing golden yellow braised chicken and rice was placed on the counter with a relaxed expression. He then scooped out a bowl of moonlight fragrant rice, and placed it beside him with a smile as he asked, "What about this time, system?" The golden chicken was evenly colored, and there were no blemishes on the surface. The potatoes were cooked but didn't fall apart. The lettuce was still green, and the red and green peppers were embellished. The golden red soup reflected the light, and it didn't feel greasy at all. The rich aroma of chicken and shiitake mushrooms wafted through the air. Just looking at it made one want to salivate. According to the host's original request for braised chicken and rice, 3 points were determined: first-grade soup, bright red in color, mellow in texture, rich in flavor, oily but not greasy, and rich in aftertaste, achieve. Second-grade meat, golden in color, smooth and tender in texture, fresh and fragrant in texture, achieve. Third-grade rice, rich in aroma, chewy and sweet in texture, achieve. All 3 requirements have been met. Congratulations to the host for successfully learning how to make braised chicken and rice. Mission accomplish. The system's voice sounded. That's all there is to it. Meg pursed his lips, and a sense of accomplishment welled up in his heart. Although he felt that the system had left something unsaid, he didn't take it to heart. He glanced at the time on the wall and saw that 80 days had already passed. As expected, the pursuit of perfection in detail was the most time-consuming and exhausting. The host has 10 minutes to taste this braised chicken and rice. After 10 minutes, the host will be sent out of the test field for the god of cookery. The system's voice sounded again. Why is it so good this time? Meg raised an eyebrow in surprise. In the past, he had always asked the system to give him some time to eat. He didn't expect that the system would take the initiative to let Meg sit down and eat slowly this time. The system did not reply. It was silent. "All right, I've worked so hard to make this perfect braised chicken, so of course I should try the first serving myself," Meg murmured to himself. He took a spoon and a pair of chopsticks from the cupboard at the side and picked up a piece of chicken. The evenly cut chicken could perfectly absorb the taste of the seasoning and broth. The golden surface was dyed with a layer of bright red broth. He slowly put it into his mouth. As soon as it entered his mouth, Meg's eyes lit up. The broth wrapped around the chicken pieces contained the rich fragrance of chicken soup and mushrooms. The wonderful taste made his taste buds, which had been silent for a long time, welcome a carnival in an instant. It was as if he was suddenly trapped in the chicken soup and mushrooms, unable to extricate himself. He gently bit into the chicken meat. The meat was incomparably fresh and tender. It was a bit more chewy than the cooked braised meat, but it didn't seem to be overripe at all. The taste of seasoning and shiitake mushrooms had perfectly seeped into the meat, and the fresh taste had reached a new level. After swallowing, the fragrance lingered in his mouth. The taste is unparalleled, the texture is excellent, top grade. Meg's eyes lit up as he looked at the braised chicken in front of him. Although it was made by him, he couldn't help but praise it. He picked up the spoon with his left hand and drank a spoonful of broth. The fragrance of the chicken soup was enhanced to the extreme by the top-grade shiitake mushrooms. He felt as if all the pores on his body had opened up, and a warm feeling nourished his whole body. Lastly, he scooped up a spoonful of rice. Every grain of rice had a small moon in it, and it emitted a faint fragrance. When he put it into his mouth, the texture was somewhat chewy. After biting into the small moon, the fragrance became even more rich, and the more he chewed, the sweeter and sweeter it became. The texture was superb. It's simply too delicious. With chopsticks in one hand and a spoon in the other, Meg couldn't stop eating. The taste of the side dishes was also superb, especially the shiitake mushrooms. After fully absorbing the chicken soup, the taste was smooth and refreshing, and the fragrance spread throughout his body. After finishing half a bowl of rice, Meg picked up the earthenware bowl and poured half of the broth into the rice bowl. After mixing it evenly, it turned into a soup of rice. After swallowing a spoonful, he felt as if he had seen the true meaning of life. This was the correct way to cook braised chicken and rice. After finishing one bowl, Meg refilled another bowl of rice. Only when both bowls were completely empty did he put down the spoon and chopsticks in his hand with a satisfied expression, and burped with satisfaction. Light flashed, and Meg was pushed out of the test field for the god of cookery. However, on this occasion, Meg didn't open his eyes. Instead, he chose to go back to sleep. He was simply too satisfied with this bowl of braised chicken and rice. The next day, Meg was awakened by the alarm clock. He reached out to turn off the alarm clock, and Meg sat up with a refreshed expression. He took a glance at Amy, who was still sleeping, and then his gaze fell on Ugly Duckling, who was holding onto the edge of the bed with all its might to prevent itself from falling. So this little guy falls down like this every day? A hint of confusion appeared on Meg's face. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling turned to Meg for help, but it only let out one cry before it fell to the ground with a thump. It lay on its back and looked up at the sky in a feeble manner. Why don't you make a little bed for yourself? Meg got up from the bed and picked up Ugly Duckling with a smile. This little guy was kicked off the bed by Amy every day, and it was indeed quite pitiful. Ugly Duckling looked at Amy, then at Meg, and hesitated momentarily with a conflicted expression. In the end, it shook its head and pointed at Amy with its little paw. Meow tilde it opened its mouth and meowed twice. All right, this is your decision. Meg gave a resigned smile, but he was still quite touched by Ugly Duckling's decision. Amy had tortured it thousands of times, but it still treated her the same way it had when it first met her. He placed Ugly Duckling beside Amy, and Amy rolled over and hugged it in a very natural manner as she murmured, "Ugly Duckling, where did you go?" Ugly Duckling licked her little hand and found a comfortable position to lie down in before closing its eyes and going back to sleep. Meg covered the two little guys with a blanket before carefully grabbing a clean set of clothes and going to wash up. He couldn't forget the delicious braised chicken and rice from the day before, so he naturally had to try it again today. After all, he had promised Amy that he would make her a delicious dish with a lot of meat. Thinking about how happy the two little guys would be as they ate the braised chicken, Meg's mood also became very good. He made his way downstairs to the kitchen, but his footsteps suddenly stopped at the entrance of the kitchen. "System, did you forget something?" Meg asked as he looked at the lonely Chinese kitchen knife on the knife rack and the stove, which was identical to the one from last night. No, the system replied calmly. Then where's my knife? Where's my pot? Where's my chicken drumstick? Meg opened the refrigerator door, but there was no chicken drumstick in it. Chapter 215. Wait, system, what did you just say? Meg asked hesitantly. Congratulations, host. You have triggered a new mission. Host, please capture a wild turkey within 24 hours. Please note that you have to capture it personally, not buy it. Mission reward, a gold-rimmed kitchen knife, unlocks the ingredients and utensils required for braised chicken. Mission failure penalty, -0. 5 physical strength, the system repeated. Not this sentence, the previous sentence. Meg shook his head. Not yet, the system repeated. Not yet. Well, it seems that I had a good dream last night. Let's do business today. Meg smiled and gently closed the fridge door. He turned around and picked up a cup of water to drink to calm his nerves. Fuck. What the hell is wrong with the system this early in the morning? It was so happy that it suddenly threw such an exciting mission at me. It didn't even consider my feelings. Meg cursed in his heart. He didn't expect the system to be so shameless. No wonder he felt that the system's words were a little strange when he was in the trial field yesterday. It turned out that the system didn't give him the right to use the utensils and purchase the ingredients for braised chicken after he completed the mission yesterday. Instead, it deliberately dug a hole for him to step into today. Fire chickens were first-tier magic beasts, and they lived in the wild. Not to mention whether Mag could defeat a fighting chicken in his current state, completing the mission within 24 hours was already a huge problem. Was he supposed to close the door and go out to kill a chicken today? No, he was supposed to catch a turkey. Anyway, he had already felt the anger of the diners. He didn't know if some radicals would be unable to resist throwing bricks at his window. Losing some customers because of breaking his promise was not worth the loss. Although the restaurant was now completely full, as a good owner, he still couldn't get over this hurdle in his heart. The mission has been issued. The 24-hour countdown begins. Host, please complete the mission as soon as possible. The system's solemn voice sounded. Finally, it added, also, please don't insult my intelligence. System, what have you been reading recently? Meg suddenly asked faintly. The self-cultivation of an actor, the system answered seriously. You drama queen, Meg said angrily. Looking at the 24-hour countdown timer in his mind, he suddenly became anxious. He was not too worried about not being able to defeat Fiery Bird. After all, his body had returned to normal. Coupled with a suitable weapon, going up against Fiery Bird should not be a problem. It wasn't a big deal to pigeonhole a customer for a day. Once you got used to it, it wouldn't hurt anymore. But she had promised Amy yesterday that she would make him a delicious breakfast with a lot of meat. In the end, it was a complete mess. Even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. When he thought about Amy's resentful gaze later, Meg couldn't help but start pacing around the restaurant. Suddenly, he stopped and asked, System, do you sell braised chicken and rice? The system has not built any food production line, so it is unable to provide any finished food, the system replied seriously. Then, why don't you go to Earth and order takeout for me? Don't worry, I won't give you any less for running the errand. Meg didn't want to give up. You can't afford to run the errand for a space-time teleportation, the system said calmly. How much? Meg didn't give up. 50,000 gold coins, the system replied. Then let's talk about buying kitchen knives and utensils. Tell me, how much do you want? Meg rolled his eyes. 50,000 gold coins, even if he was killed, he still wouldn't be able to take it out. This, you can't afford it either. The system had already started to get complacent. You win. Meg pulled out a chair and sat down, lost in thought. The countdown timer in his mind was still ticking. From the system's tone, it was not that spending money could not solve the problem, but the problem was that he had no money. This was really a sad story. In order to prove that selling vegetables was not to be trifled with, the system had already started to resist. It seemed that the turkey had to be caught, and the customer had to be left alone. However, he didn't want to be perfunctory about Amy. After thinking seriously for a while, he suddenly asked, "System, can I buy the ingredients in the fridge and use them freely?" The system does not recommend the host to study the recipes on his own. You are still a rookie, and the dishes you make on your own are not worthy of the restaurant's grade. It may lower the restaurant's style and arouse the disgust of the customers, and the system objected. "As long as it can be worthy of the fatherly love I have for Amy, that's enough." Meg put down the cup in his hand, got up and walked to the kitchen, and said while putting on an apron, "1 braised prawn, 1 scrambled egg with green pepper. It's a pity that I don't know how to make braised pork, but a plate of sliced braised pork should be good," Meg whispered to himself and walked to the kitchen. "Sue." The system still wanted to say something. "System, if you say any more nonsense, I won't upgrade to level 2 for the rest of my life," Meg said calmly while processing the marinated streaky pork. The system immediately fell silent. Meg didn't cut much of the streaky pork, because it only needed the amount that 2 people ate in the morning. He deliberately cut a little more lean meat to avoid getting sick of eating too much fat. He threw the rest into the fridge and let the system do as it saw fit. He had to make sure that it could still be used tomorrow morning. "It smells so good. Father, what delicious food are you making?" Amy asked with surprise and curiosity as she came downstairs with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She had changed into a little magician's robe, and her silver hair was loose, with one strand sticking up. She was looking at Meg, who was stir-frying the pan, with surprise and curiosity. Meg looked back at Amy with a smile, and said, "Sit down obediently and wait for a while. You'll know." "Okay." Amy nodded and returned to her seat happily. She looked in the direction of the kitchen expectantly. The red prawns in the pan were giving off a tempting aroma. Meg's cooking method was similar to the braised chicken, but he added less sugar and no side dishes. He only added simple spices such as ginger, garlic, and chili. He added soy sauce, covered the pan, and braised it for a while. When he put it on a plate, he arranged it neatly, and a plate of braised prawns with color, aroma, and taste was ready. After washing the pan, Meg made a scrambled egg with green pepper. The golden egg matched with the tender green pepper looked very appetizing. The braised pork was also ready. He took it out and cut it into thin strips, and served it with a small plate of sour and spicy sauce. Meg carried the 3 dishes and 2 bowls of white rice out of the kitchen. Chapter 216. Millimeter. This is something I made for Amy. It's not for sale. Meg looked at Amy with a doting expression as he placed one dish after another on the table. The system was only half right. He was indeed a rookie who could only cook 4 dishes perfectly, but he had slowly perfected those 4 dishes himself, reaching a level that even the top chefs on Earth couldn't reach. Drawing parallels was also applicable to cooking. At the very least, Meg felt that he could cook some dishes using similar methods. Perhaps they were far from perfect, but they were good enough as home-cooked dishes. Right at this moment, the system's voice sounded. "System warning, the restaurant is at level 1, so self-research is prohibited. The host has already violated the rules once, so a level 3 warning is issued. If 3 level 3 warnings are issued, the restaurant will be downgraded." Downgraded? System, isn't the restaurant the lowest level now? Meg said nonchalantly as he put down the plate and sat down. A level 1 restaurant will revert to the state it was in before the system was modified, the system replied calmly. Meg thought back to the dilapidated and swaying house on the first day, and he couldn't remain calm. That house really wasn't a place for humans to live in. Host, as a candidate for the god of cookery, you should be strict with yourself before you become a god of cookery candidate. Only by perfecting each dish to the extreme can you start to cook new dishes. Only with a solid foundation can you progress steadily and have a chance to become the god of cookery. The system's voice became extremely serious. "All right, then I'll cook 2 more dishes at most," Meg replied after a moment of silence. The system's words weren't unreasonable. After cooking these 2 dishes, he was indeed a little tempted to try other dishes. Perhaps it would get out of hand. However, Dishes cooked like this had almost no self-control, and after the first impression was the strongest, it would be even more difficult to reverse and perfect the dishes in the future. An ellipsis appeared in the system's mind, and it didn't say anything else. Meow tilde ugly duckling stared at the prawns on the plate with glowing eyes. It stretched out its little paws, but didn't dare to touch the table. Amy, put ugly duckling aside and wash your hands before eating, Meg said with a smile as he looked at Amy, who was stretching out her little paws to grab the prawns. All right. Amy looked at the delicious-looking prawns with reluctance, but she still answered obediently. She put Ugly Duckling on the ground, and ran to the kitchen with her short legs. Ugly Duckling, come here. I'll give you one first. Meg called out to Ugly Duckling. He picked up a prawn, peeled off the shell, and fed it to Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling raised its head and took small bites, eating with great relish. Father, I want to be fed too. After washing her hands, Amy walked over and squatted beside Ugly Duckling. She also looked up at Meg with her mouth wide open. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling turned to look at Amy with a hint of resentment in its eyes. This is my father. Amy looked back at Ugly Duckling with a serious expression. Meow, meow tilde Ugly Duckling immediately gave in. It turned its head sideways and rubbed Amy's calf as obedient as it could be. All right, both of you. Meg nodded with a smile. He peeled another prawn and fed it to Amy. Amy took a small bite of the prawn. Her eyes lit up as she chewed happily. She looked at Meg happily, and said, Father, this prawn is really delicious. And I really ate a lot of prawn meat today. Father really wouldn't lie to me. Millimeter, eat more if you like it. Meg looked at Amy's adorable table manners, and the smile on his face became even brighter. The greatest sense of accomplishment was probably when he was praised by his own daughter. It was indeed very important to keep one's promise to one's children. The story of Zhengzi killing the swine had been passed down for thousands of years. It was full of the wisdom of the ancients in educating children. The breakfast passed in a happy atmosphere because the two little guys really liked it. They finished the whole plate of braised prawns. Meg didn't even taste a single one himself, but judging from the satisfied expressions of the two little guys, it should be good. System, will it be dangerous for me to hunt in this state? Meg asked in his mind as he put away the bowls. Please rest assured, host. There is a 50% chance of survival, the system's calm voice sounded. Meg's hand trembled, and the bowl in his hand almost fell. He said with a strange expression, System, isn't it just catching a chicken? Why is there a 50% chance of death? It's too easy to die, isn't it? In the wilderness, the situation changes rapidly. Turkeys can only be regarded as the lowest-level magic beast, but the host may encounter some powerful magic beasts in the process of searching for turkeys. The probability of this happening is about 50%. So, as long as I touch it, I'll die? Am I that weak? Meg couldn't help complaining in his mind. Host, do you think you are very powerful? The system asked back. Meg thought for a moment. It had only been 2 days since he recovered from his semi-disabled state. If he encountered a second-level magic beast, his chance of survival was indeed 0. He couldn't help but complain, System, are you pushing me into a fire pit? Can't you just cook? Why do you want to eat chicken? The host can increase the chance of survival by purchasing items up to 99%. The system's voice suddenly became brisk. This is your ultimate goal, isn't it? Meg suddenly felt a little absurd. This money-hungry system was really unscrupulous in order to make money. I don't have the money to buy a weapon of 1,000 gold coins, Meg calmly said as he walked to the kitchen with the bowl. The system provides a daily weapon rental service. It only costs 10 gold coins a day to enjoy a top-level custom-made weapon. If you rent it for more than 7 days, you can enjoy a 10% discount. The system also provides a daily rental service for armor of various prices, including one-time magic shields, one-time magic attack waves, one-time. The system's voice was full of enthusiasm. Meg's face darkened. It seemed that the system had seen through his acting skills and was getting more and more sophisticated. He suddenly asked, System, if I bring Amy with me, what are my chances of survival? The system was silent for a while, then said with some difficulty, 100%. What the hell is that? Meg was shocked. Amy is much more powerful than you, the system said quietly. As long as I bring Amy with me, my chances of survival are really 100%. Meg wasn't the least bit unhappy that his daughter had outshone him. According to the system's precise calculations, it is 100%. The system replied with certainty, then solemnly suggested, however, the system does not recommend the host to bring Amy with him. This is a serious cheating behavior and will be severely condemned. Moreover, Amy's studies are more important. If she skips class on the second day of school, it will not be good for her to develop good study habits. Chapter 217. Skipping class? Amy, who was playing with Ugly Duckling with a small piece of cloth, turned to look at Meg in confusion. Millimeter. We're not going to class today. We're going out of the city to catch a combat chicken. Meg nodded. In this life, he cherished his life even more. Since the system said that he would be 100% safe as long as he brought Amy along, this was naturally the best choice. Even if there was only a 1% risk, he didn't want to try his luck. He couldn't bear to leave Amy alone. Amy's eyes lit up when she heard that, and she asked expectantly, "Then can we have chicken for dinner?" "Yes." Meg nodded. Okay. Then let's set off now to catch a chicken." Amy jumped down from her chair and urged happily. "Wait a moment. I'll write 2 leave requests first. One for Teacher Crassus, and the other for the customers," Meg said with a smile. He walked to the counter, took out a pen and paper, and wrote 2 leave requests. Since Crassus was on sick leave, it was even easier for the guests. "Can Ugly Duckling come with us?" Amy asked as she hugged Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling also looked at him pitifully. "System, will bringing Ugly Duckling affect the survival rate?" Meg asked in his mind. "There will be a certain positive effect if you bring it along," the system replied. "Then bring it along." Meg looked at Amy with a smile. Although he didn't know what the system meant by positive effect, it sounded like there would be benefits to bringing this little fellow along. "Let's go." Meg carried a small bag with a bottle of water, for baiji buns, and some seasonings in it. Since they were going to travel in the wilderness, of course he had to bring the necessary supplies. Otherwise, the system would most likely scam him later. Pulling the bicycle out, Meg pasted a leave of absence slip on the door. "I'm going out to gather ingredients. I'm taking a day off. I'll be making a new dish tomorrow. Please look forward to it." It was only slightly past 6 a.m., so there were no customers at the entrance. Meg then rode his bicycle to the entrance of Chaos School, and handed the leave request slip to the guard so that he could pass it to the Crassus. "Grandpa Radish, Uncle Red-Haired Turtle, goodbye." Amy sat in the back seat and waved at the 2 of them. "The little girl doesn't look sick at all, does she?" Antoine glanced at the leave slip in his hand and exchanged a look with Arnaud. Both of them had strange expressions on their faces. "Father, are we going out of the city now? Remi has never left the city since she was young." "What was outside the city?" Daphne said that there are many terrifying magic beasts outside the city. Her father is a very powerful mercenary, and he brings back a lot of prey every time he comes back. Amy was sitting in the back seat, and she was very curious about the world outside the city walls. "We have to go to the Chaos Guild first. We have to find out where we can catch turkeys first." Meg smiled. He was in a good mood. Although he had already been tricked by the system, he decided to take Amy on an outing. Seeing her happy face, it was all worth it. The Chaos Guild was the only mercenary guild in Chaos City. They received countless bounty missions from all over the continent every day. The difficulty of the missions and the rewards varied greatly, so countless mercenary groups, adventurers gathered there. It was the largest mercenary guild on the Norland continent, and had the most registered mercenaries. "Are we going to become mercenaries too?" Amy's eyes immediately lit up. "Yes. Let's go and see if there are any missions to catch turkeys." Meg nodded with a smile. If the system didn't require him to capture turkeys personally, then Meg would have issued a mercenary mission directly. However, there were only 2 options now. The first was to buy the map of turkeys, which was probably a little expensive. The second was to accept a mission to catch turkeys, which should come with a free map. The Chaos Guild was located outside the Aiden Square near the city walls. The Aiden Square was round, and the Chaos Guild was in the corner. Meg stopped the car, and said to Ugly Duckling, who was lying on its back in the car seat, "Ugly Duckling, you can watch the car from here." "Meow Tilda." Ugly Duckling meowed, but its eyes still couldn't focus. It was already a useless cat. Meg looked up at the huge black stone building in front of him, and was also a little stunned. The main body of the building was 20 meters tall, and the black stone surface was a little rough, making it look very rough and grand. There were 8 white stone pillars in front of the palace, and they were as tall as the stone building. They were lined up in a row, creating a grand sight to behold. It was said that these 8 stone pillars represented the 8 major races that had signed the armistice agreement in Chaos City. The originally smooth stone pillars had been weathered by wind and rain for decades, and many wrinkles had appeared on their surfaces, giving them a sense of vicissitudes. There was no writing on the stone hall, but there was a round emblem at the center of the hall. Inside the emblem was a white dove holding an olive branch in its mouth. This was the emblem of Chaos City. It was said that after the armistice agreement was signed, representatives of all races fought tooth and nail over the emblem of Chaos City. All of them wanted to use their own race as the emblem of peace, and it almost triggered a second racial war. At this moment, a white dove holding an olive branch in its mouth flew past the venue, and the elven representative suggested that the white dove should be used as the emblem of Chaos City, which was approved by all parties. Perhaps this is some kind of historical coincidence. Meg smiled as he held Amy's little hand and walked toward the main gate of the guild. The Chaos Guild was backed by the Grey Temple and the City Lord's castle, so they also used Chaos City's emblem. The gate that was 10 meters tall was wide open. Even Chaos City's city gate wasn't as tall as this. A forest troll that was 7 to 8 meters tall, with dark green skin and creepers crawling all over its back, strode past Meg and Amy, and the ground trembled slightly with each step it took. "Hey, big guy, watch where you're going." A team of about 30 goblins walked out of the palace with bows and magic staffs in their hands, and they were about to encounter the forest troll. The leader of the goblins was slightly older, and he yelled at the forest troll in a sharp voice. "Big guy, Little Red Riding Hood." Amy's eyes widened as she stared at the Little Red Riding Hood on the goblins' heads. Meg was also looking at this scene with surprise. Those goblins were only half a meter tall, and only reached the forest troll's ankles. A single stomp from the forest troll would be enough to wipe them out. However, they were fully equipped, so they weren't weak, either. Would there be a clash between the two? "Captain, could it be that he didn't hear us?" a young goblin in the team asked worriedly. Chapter 218. Stop your steps. Otherwise, this will be seen as a great threat to us. Seeing the approaching foot, the goblin captain's expression became more and more serious. His hand was already on the hilt of his sword as he shouted loudly. The goblins had already drawn their long swords and raised their magic staffs. A battle was about to begin. At this moment, the forest troll that had been ignoring them and raising its right leg to stomp down on the goblin team suddenly felt something and stopped in its tracks. It lowered its head to look at the forest trolls at its feet, scratched its head, and turned its steps to the side as it continued to walk in. "Captain, I feel like that big guy is insulting us," the first goblin who had drawn his sword said angrily. He looked like he was about to rush up and hack at him. "Let's go. Fighting is not allowed near the Chaos Guild. Otherwise, your membership will be permanently revoked." "That big guy just has bad hearing," the captain said calmly as he let go of his longsword and left. But the youth still wanted to say something. "Let's go. Do you really think you can fight with him?" a middle-aged goblin beside him said with a smile as he patted his shoulder lightly. "Aye." The youth turned around to look at the forest troll's huge back. He hesitated for a moment, but still chose to quickly follow, looking a little disheartened. "Rules, order, strength and weakness. Interesting." Meg looked at this scene and the corners of his mouth curled up. If this was a different place, he would probably be able to watch a battle before entering. Let's go. Meg held Amy's little hand and continued walking. Father, if that big guy and those little ones were to fight, who would win? Amy looked up at Meg curiously as she asked. Probably the big guy, Meg said with a smile. But Little Red Riding Hood and the others have more people. Amy was still a little confused. True strength doesn't need to make a sound to make others back down. Meg shook his head. Oh. Amy nodded thoughtfully. She turned back to look at the goblins in the distance and said with a smile, but they're still very brave. Big guy gave in to them. Yes. Meg was a little surprised at Amy's understanding of the situation, but when he thought about it carefully, there was indeed no problem. Wow, what a big house. Amy couldn't help but exclaim as soon as the two of them entered the main hall. Her eyes widened as she looked around. Meg's eyes were also filled with amazement. Although he had Meg Alex's memories of the Chaos Guild, he was still amazed by the superb construction skills of the otherworldly craftsman when he saw it with his own eyes. There were 2 floors in the hall, and each floor was covered with a layer of dust. It looked like a busy airport. In the middle of the hall, there was a magic crystal wall with information scrolling on it. Mercenaries and adventurers of various races were looking up at the missions with serial numbers. After selecting a suitable mission, they would go to the registration desk to receive and register the mission. There were dozens of such crystal walls. The Mercenary Guild had already categorized the information in advance. They were distributed according to the Daily Activities section, Combat section, Spirit Beast section, Material section, Food section. For example, in the Daily Activities section, there were missions to collect debts, find pets, and take care of children. Meg even saw a mission to send flowers to a girl he liked. The reward for the mission was 10 copper coins, and it was quickly claimed by a little girl. Mag brought Amy to the ingredients section, and began to search seriously with his head tilted upward. The food section was one of the more lively sections. There were many mercenaries standing in front of 2 large magic crystal boards that were 5 meters tall. There were elves, humans, orcs, and demons. Some were in groups of 3 to 5, and some were alone. They were all selecting suitable missions. Some restaurants in Chaos City liked to serve food made from high-level magic beasts, and the customers were curious. Even if the price was high and the taste was average, they would still go and try it. It was similar to the rich people in his previous life eating wild animals. It was just that there was no one to protect these animals in this world, and they had to rely on themselves. The high-level magic beasts were very powerful, and their rewards were also very high. For example, the number 1/8 tier magic beast, the 3 silver-haired leopards, had a reward of 10,000 gold coins. This was Mammoth's net profit for the past half a month. Further down, there were 7th tier, 6th tier, 5th tier. All kinds of magic beasts were listed on the list, and their prices were clearly marked. Meg saw the huge potential of the foodies in this world. After all, there were people who offered a reward for 1 kilogram of the 1st tier magic beast, the withered leaf cicada. This deep-fried dark cuisine made Meg flinch at the sight of it. He didn't expect that there would be people in this world who liked it. He just didn't know how to cook it. Meg, who was carrying a strange backpack and a little lowly, attracted the attention of many mercenaries and adventurers. He didn't even have a single weapon on him. It was rare to see someone carrying a little lowly out on a mission. Usually, there would be women who would bring their children out for daily missions in the daily mission section. However, the food ingredients section usually posted all kinds of ingredients that weren't easy to find in the market, and most of them were the meat of various magic beasts. Even a 1st tier magic beast could easily kill 10 normal people. The withered leaf cicada, which was valued by the kilogram, was not something to be trifled with. Its wings, which were like withered leaves, could fly out like 2 flying daggers at a critical moment, easily piercing through the throat and killing in one shot. But this guy didn't bring anything with him, and only brought a child along. It's autumn now. Are you planning to bring the child for an autumn outing? An honest-looking uncle asked Meg with a smile. This little girl was so beautiful, and he couldn't bear to see her being dragged into a trap by this hot-headed old man. He wanted to give him some advice. Meg was stunned for a moment, and then nodded with a smile. Yes, I'm planning to bring the child out of the city. He didn't care about everyone's gazes. After all, it wouldn't hurt him to be stared at a few more times. Besides, he had already found the fire chicken mission. Food, mission number 256, capture a wildfire chicken alive. Reward, 10 gold coins. The autumn outing is to the north. It's beautiful everywhere outside the city. Don't you see the Chaos School's spring and autumn excursions go that way every year? The scenery there is beautiful, and there's no danger. The child will definitely like it. As for the missions, you can do them anytime. You should have fun with the child. That uncle frowned. He didn't expect this kid to really bring the child to the autumn outing, and he was really going to take the mission together. The missions above weren't simple. No one would post missions for ingredients that could be bought in the market here. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.